Welcome back, fearless wanderers of the paranormal, to my channel, where shadows linger in every corner, whispers drift through the trees, and the past never truly fades away. Tonight, we journey deep into the forests of Washington, where moss-covered trees and fog-shrouded valleys conceal secrets, tragedies, and restless spirits. Hidden in these woods are abandoned cabins, long forgotten by time, yet alive with ghostly activity. Some cabins are haunted by their original owners, trapped by violent deaths or unfulfilled grudges. Others echo with the cries of visitors who vanish mysteriously, never to return. Some warn the living to stay away, while others invite the curiosa, only to trap them, because in these remote woods, the dead are never alonia, and sometimes they come to meet you, hidden deep in the misty forests of Mount Rainier National Park. Stands a weathered shell of Blackwood Cabin A, a structure so consumed by legend that even seasoned rangers avoid its trails after dark. The cabin sits at the edge of a ridge overlooking a stretch of dense evergreens, half swallowed by moss and fog. Its roof has sagged under decades of snow, its windows long shattered, but the stories it carries refuse to fade. Those woe dare to spend a night near it speak of voices that seem to whisper from the walls, of footsteps pacing the floors when no one else is inside, and of something unseen watching from the darkness. The cabina's origin dates back to the early 1900s, when it was built by a man named Elias Blackwood, a hermit who came to the mountain seeking solitude after losing his family in a fire near Tacoma. Locals described him as quiet, odd, and deeply reclusive, though he was occasionally seen walking the trails with his old lantern, muttering to himself about the voices in the trees. He lived there alone for years, through snowstorms and long winters, until one spring morning when a group of hikers found the cabin abandoned. A pot still sat on the wood stove, ashes were cold in the fireplace, and the door was wide open. Elias was gone, leaving behind only his axe and a set of footprints that led into the woods and then stopped in the middle of nowhere. For decades afterward, strange stories began to surround Blackwood Cabin. Rangers reported lights flickering through the fog at night, as if a lantern were moving slowly around cabina's perimeter. Some claimed they heard chopping sounds echoing through the trees, though no one was there. Visitors hiking nearby have spoken of hearing a manna's voice humming low and tunelessly from within the cabin, fading whenever they approached. The few who dared to enter describe an overwhelming feeling of being watched, as though the air itself were aware of them. Inside, the cabin is sparse as a single table, a broken chair, and a bed frame rusted through with time. Yet the air inside feels thick, as if it holds on to something unseen. Travelers have described the floorboards creaking under invisible weight, slow, deliberate footsteps that circle the room. Shadows dance along the walls, cast by no known light source, and cold drafts sweep through the cabin even when the doors and windows are sealed. Candles flicker as if disturbed by unseen breath, and more than one visitor has claimed to hear whispers just behind them, guttural, raspy words that vanish when they turn around. The most unsettling reports come from those who stayed too long. Some describe the door slamming shut without warning, trapping them inside as the temperature plummets. Others have felt a rush of icy wind sweep past their faces, followed by the distinct growl of something standing inches away in the dark. The sound is said to be deep and human-like, but unnatural as the growl of a man who hasn't drawn breath in decades. When the noise stops, silence falls with suffocating weight, and those who linger too long claim to hear faint scratching at the windows, as though something outside is circling the cabin, waiting. Many believe Elias Blackwood never truly left. Some say his isolation drove him to madness, that he lost himself to the mountain's whispers and became part of it. Others think he died within those woods, and his spirit returned to the only home he ever knew. Whatever the truth, visitors insist that his presence lingers a protective, perhaps, but filled with warning. There are stories of hikers who ventured too close only to feel a freezing gust push them back, or of cameras malfunctioning the instant they pointed toward the cabina's door. Some have even claimed to see a figure standing in the window, a gaunt man with hollow eyes, watching silently from within. Local lore has shaped the legend further. Ida said that the hermit appears most often when storms roll across the mountain, as thunder echoes through the valleys and rain lashes the roof. A single lantern light appears in the window, swaying gently. Those who see it are advised to turn back immediately, for if they continue forward, the light will vanish, and a voice will whisper their name through the wind. Some hikers insist they have heard it even miles away, the faint syllables carried through the pines, each repetition colder and closer than before. Over time, the National Park Service fenced off the trail leading to Blackwood Cabin, citing safety concerns about unstable structures and frequent landslides. Yet that hasn't stopped the curious from finding their way there. Every year, new accounts surface of campers who wake to the sound of distant chopping, or who find boot prints in the snow circling their tents. The prints always stop abruptly, as if the walker had vanished mid-step. In the daylight, Blackwood Cabin looks harmless, a forgotten relic of the past, another ruin reclaimed by the forest. But when night descends and fog drifts low through the trees, the mountain seems to change. The woods grow unnaturally still, and the faint sound of creaking wood echoes through the silence. Those who've been there say it feels like the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting. They say that if you stand outside the cabin and call out Elias Blackwood's name, you'll hear him answer. Sometimes at a faint whisper from inside, other times a growl that comes from right behind you, too close, too real. A few have felt an unseen hand brush their shoulder, cold as ice, or a gust of air so sharp it steals their breath. And if you linger after that, if you stay long enough to challenge the silence, the cabin door will begin to move on its own, creaking open just enough for you to see the dark inside. Whether the spirit of Elias Blackwood warns, protects, or haunts, no one truly knows. But deep within Mount Rainier's fog, his cabin endures a place where the line between the living and the dead is thinned, and where every whisper, every shadow, every cold breath might just belong to a man who vanished into mountain and never came back. Deep in the heart of the Olympic National Forest, hidden beneath towering cedars and constant mist, its moss-covered roof sags under the weight of time, and its wooden walls are darkened by years of rain and shadow. The air there feels different, as still, heavy, and charged with something unseen. Travelers who come upon it rarely stay long. Some say the forest itself grows quiet around the cabin, as though the trees are listening. Others claim they hear faint laughter or the sound of footsteps pacing the porch when no one else is near. Cedar Hollow rests beside a slow-moving stream, its waters whispering softly through the fog. But when evening falls, the place takes on a presence of its own. Lanterns refuse to stay lit. Cameras malfunction. The forest darkens faster than it should, and the quiet becomes suffocating. Those who have stood outside at night speak of movement inside the cabina. Shadows crossing the windows, furniture creaking, and the soft sound of humming, low and sorrowful. According to old stories passed down through nearby towns, the cabin once belonged to the Whitlock family. In the late 1800s, they came west searching for peace after tragedy struck their small homestead near Tacoma. John Whitlock built the cabin by hand, using cedar from the forest and stones from the stream. His wife, Miriam, became its caretaker, tending to the land and raising their 2 young children while John hunted and trapped. Locals who knew them said Miriam had a strong spirit and a gentle heart. She would leave food out for travelers, nurse injured animals, and light a lamp every night, so lost wanderers could find their way through fog. But one winter, a storm came down from the mountains, a brutal, endless gale that buried the forest in snow and cut off all escape. Days passed without sunlight. The wind screamed through the trees, and the cabin groaned under their weight. When rescuers finally reached the clearing weeks later, they found the door torn from its hinges, the windows shattered, and the interior in shambles. Inside, only Miriam was found. She had died near the hearth, her arms wrapped around a broken lantern. Of her husband and children, there was no trace. No one could explain what happened, Some said the storm drove John and the children to try and find help, only to be lost in the snow. Something older than the storm, something that wanted to claim the cabin for itself. And Cedar Hollow was abandoned soon after. Over the decades, hikers and loggers began reporting strange encounters near the cabin. A woman-esque figure glimpsed through the trees. Faint laughter drifting to the fog, footsteps pacing along the porch, chairs scraping across wooden floors. Campers who set up nearby awoke to find their gear rearranged, or their fires extinguished without a trace of wind. A few claimed to see Hera, the woman in the window, pale and still, her eyes filled with sorrow. When they called out to her, she simply faded away, leaving only silence. Those who entered the cabin reported stronger encounters. One hiker described setting his pack on a table, only to watch it slide off as though pushed by unseen hands. Another said he heard soft humming coming from a back room, and when he followed the sound, found the air thick with cold mist. Some felt sudden drops in temperature so sharp that frost formed on their breath. Others swore they heard a woman-esque voice whispering their names, urging them to leave. Locals say the spirit that haunts Cedar Hollow is still Miriam Whitlock, the devoted caretaker who died protecting her family. They believe she remains bound to the cabin, guarding it from outsiders just as she once shielded her children from the storm. She is not malevolent, they say only vigilant. But those who come with disrespect or ill intent never make it far. One man who tried to scavenge wood from the cabin claimed his truck refused to start until he returned every piece. Another, who carved his initials into the porch, woke in the night to find them gone, as if the wood had healed itself. Rangers who patrol the forest avoid the area after dusk. They say that sometimes when the fog rolls in thick, a lantern light can be seen swaying near the stream. It moves slowly, as if someone is walking, searching for something or someone. On nights when the wind is low, faint singing can be heard through the cedars, a woman-esque voice carried gently on the air. Some hikers follow the sound, thinking Ida as another traveler ahead. But when they reach the clearing, the cabin stands empty, and the singing fades into the sound of the stream. There are those who claim the spirit of Miriam appears not to harm, but to protect. In one story, a pair of campers were caught in a sudden storm. They became lost in the woods, their lanterns extinguished by wind. Just when they thought they'd defreeze, they saw a faint glow of Hida light that led them through the trees to the old cabin. Inside, the fireplace burned low, though they found no wood or matches. They slept there through the night, and when they woke, the fire was out, but the storm had passed. On the table, they found an old, rusted lantern, still warm to the touch. Cedar Hollow cabin remains standing, defying time and weather. It creaks and sighs with every gust of wind, its windows dark, its door slightly ajar. The forest has grown around it, swallowing its edges in green, but the cabin endures. Those who pass through the Olympic wilderness sometimes feel drawn toward it, as if something is calling them home. And when they reach the stream, they say they see her a woman standing in the window, watching through the mist. Her face is calm, her eyes distant. She doesn't move, doesn't speak, but the air grows colder and the forest falls silent. Then, as the fog thickens, she fades, leaving only the faint scent of cedar, and the soft whispered stream flowing endlessly past the cabin. She still calls her own. Hidden high in the misty slopes of Snoqualmie Pass, where snow blankets the ridges for most of the year, stand a cabin that few dare to approach after dark. Known as Pine Ridge Cabin, it sits alone among tall pines that bend under the weight of endless storms. The wind here never truly stops. It moans through the trees, rattling loose shutters and carrying with a voice that seems almost human. Travelers who stumble upon the cabin say it feels like stepping into another world, one where time has stopped and the air itself listens. From a distance, Pine Ridge looks ordinary enough, a small log-built shelter, its roof sagging under layers of moss and snow. But as you draw closer, the silence becomes heavy. The forest feels watchful, as if the mountain is aware of your presence. Many who have ventured close report hearing faint whispers carried on the wind aloft, drawn-out syllables that seem to call their names. Some claim the whispers come from the cabin itself, while others insist they rise from the snow-covered ground. No one knows exactly when Pine Ridge Cabin was built, but locals say it dates back to the early 1900s, during the mining rush that swept through the Cascades. Prospectors had come in search of gold and quartz, carving rough trails through the wilderness. Among them was a man named Elias Turner, a solitary miner known for his stubborn determination. He built the cabin himself, hauling logs and stone up the mountain to create a place where he could work through the winter. The townsfolk in nearby Snoqualmie saw him occasionally thin, quiet, with frost in his beard and a faraway look in his eyes. He began spending longer hours underground, digging through ice and shale, convinced he'd defound his fortune. But then one winter, a massive avalanche came roaring down the pass. It buried everything in its path, including the entrance to Elias's mine. When the snow finally settled, no one saw him again. Rescue teams searched for weeks, but found nothing. The cabin stood empty, its door hanging open, a single lantern still burning on the table inside. Years passed, and Pine Ridge fell into ruin. The place never lost its strange pull. Hikers and hunters who passed through the area reported strange occurrences near the site. Lights flickering through the trees late at night. Footsteps crunching in fresh snow when no one else was there. Some said they felt a sudden chill, even when standing near a fire. Others swore they saw a shadow moving between the trees, tall, slow, carrying something over its shoulder. The most chilling stories came from those who dared to spend a night inside. One hiker recounted lighting a lantern, only for the flame to flicker wildly as if gasping for air. Moments later, the temperature dropped sharply, and a whisper rose from behind the walls. He heard his own name spoken drawn out softly, almost pleadingly. Then, a light appeared outside the window, drifting through the snow like a lantern being carried through fog. When he ran out to look, it vanished. Another explorer claimed he felt a cold hand press against his shoulder, gently turning him toward the door, as though urging him to leave. Locals began to believe the spirit of Elias Turner still lingered at Pine Ridge. They say he never escaped the avalanche, that his body remains buried deep beneath the mountain, while his restless soul wanders the ridge, forever searching for a way home. Some say he tries to warn travelers away from danger, guiding them through snowstorms or lost trails. Others claim he leads them astray, luring them toward the old mine that no longer exists. Those who survive the experience speak of an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as though the very air around the cabin grieves for something long lost. A few years ago, a pair of climbers decided to document their visit to the cabin. They brought cameras, recorders, and motion sensors, determined to capture evidence of the haunting. For the first few hours, nothing happened. Then, just after midnight, their equipment began to fail. Batteries drained instantly. Their lanterns flickered out one by one. One of them reported hearing the sound of boots crunching slowly across the porch, though the door never opened. Later, when reviewing their recordings, they discovered faint whispers layered over the wind of murmurs repeating the same two words, "Hey, help me today." When they returned to town, both climbers were pale and shaken. They refused to speak publicly about what they had experienced. But one of them confided to a friend that something unseen had guided them out of the forest. He said he felt a hand on his back, steadying him as he stumbled through the snow, leading him safely back to the main trail. When he turned to thank whoever it was, no one stood there, only the faint outline of boot prints vanishing into the dark. Even today, those who travel near Pine Ridge say the mountain carries Elias Turner's presence. On clear nights, a faint light can be seen moving through the trees, too high and too slow to be a flashlight. Some hear tapping sounds in the distance, like a pickaxe striking rock beneath the ground. Others say that if you stand near the cabina's door and listen closely, you can hear a man's breath is steady and rhythmic, as if he is still working somewhere deep within the earth. Winter is when the haunting grows strongest. Blizzards roll in without warning, Fog descends suddenly, and the snow muffles every sound except for the faint whisper of a voice calling from beyond the trees. Travelers who hear it say it feels less like a warning and more like a plea of lost soul reaching out, begging to be remembered. Pine Ridge Cabin remains a place of mystery and unease, a reminder how easily man can be swallowed by the wilderness. The forest grows thicker every year, but the cabin endures, defying time and decay. Its windows remain dark, its door forever open. And on certain nights, when the wind carries the sound just right, those who pass along the ridge claim to hear a single whisper riding the snow, a manna-esque voice calling from somewhere deep within the mountain, still searching for the way out. Hidden deep within the dense wilderness of Gifford-Pinchot National Forest lies a cabin known to few, but whispered about by many a Ravina-esque rest. Surrounded by towering evergreens and endless mist, the cabin sits at the end of a narrow, unmarked trail. Moss coats its roof, and the forest seems to crowd close around it, as if trying to reclaim the structure. Those who stumble upon it often describe the same uneasy silence, a silence so complete that it feels unnatural, broken only by the occasional call of a raven echoing through the trees. No one knows exactly when Ravina-esque rest was built, but the earliest accounts trace back nearly a century. Locals spoke of a man named Abel Corvin, a reclusive figure who arrived in the area sometime in the 1920s. He was a scholar of strange interests, rumored to study folklore, ancient languages, and the darker corners of mysticism. He purchased a small parcel of land in the heart of the forest and built his cabin by hand, naming it Ravina-esque Rest, perhaps for the flocks of blackbirds that gathered around his clearing, or perhaps for reasons darker still. In the small nearby town of Trout Lake, stories began to spread. People said that Corvin rarely came to town, and when he did, he bought odd things. Candles by the dozen, jars of salt, and old books whenever you find them. At night, strange lights were seen flickering between the trees, and the sound of chanting carried faintly on the wind. Hunters who ventured too close claimed to find carved symbols in the bark of trees, arranged in circles, that made the animals avoid the area entirely. Then, one winter, Abel Corvin vanished. His cabin was found abandoned, the door hanging open, candles burned down to wax puddles, and a strange mark carved into the floor, a spiral surrounded by bird-like sigils. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints in the snow, and no explanation for what had happened. Only one thing was certain. The ravens that had always circled the clearing seemed to multiply after that day, their cries echoing like a chorus of warning. For decades, Ravina-esque Rest remained untouched. The forest grew thicker, the trail nearly disappeared, and the cabin began to rot where it stood. Yet, hikers who happened upon it still spoke of the same things, a doors creaking open as if pushed by unseen hands, windows slamming shut despite the still air, and the sound of whispering voices that seemed to move through the trees. Some reported feeling watched, their skin prickling with cold as they crossed the threshold. The strangest of all the reports involved a shadow, a shape resembling a great raven that moves independently of the light. Visitors have described seeing it glide across the walls, its wings outstretched, its form unnaturally sharp. Sometimes it perches on the ceiling beams, silent and unmoving. Other times, it follows those who enter, growing darker and larger the longer they stay. Those who have seen it up close describe glowing eyes within the shadow, a faint, amber, and intelligent. One forest ranger, who once camped near the area, told of hearing knocking sounds from the cabin late at night, a 3 sharp raps, followed by silence. The next morning, he found raven feathers scattered around his tent, though no birds had been seen in the area for days. Another visitor claimed that when he shone his flashlight into one of cabina-esque cracked windows, the beam reflected back from inside as though something had looked directly at him from the darkness. Locals say Abel Corvina's obsession with ravens was more than symbolic. He believed they were messengers, carriers between worlds, able to traverse the boundary between life and death. Ida said that he performed rituals meant to communicate with them, to gain their wisdom or perhaps their power. Some believe he succeeded, that he bound himself to the birds, his soul merging with their dark wings. The legend claims the spirit still lingers in the forest, drawn to fear and curiosity alike, feeding on the emotions of those who trespass on his ground. Over the years, the forest around Ravina S. Rest has gained a sinister reputation. Campers hear strange noises echoing through the trees, and not just bird calls, but the sound of footsteps circling their camps and low murmurs just beyond the reach of their firelight. A few have claimed to see a figure standing in the distance, tall and motionless, its outline blurred by fog. When approached, it dissolves into a flurry of ravens that vanish into the sky. Perhaps the most unsettling tale comes from a pair of hikers who discovered the cabin one autumn evening. They said the door opened on its own, groaning as though reluctant to move. Inside, everything was coated in dust except for a single chair and table, both perfectly clean. On the table lay a black feather and a small leather-bound book, its pages blank except for one, where a single line had been written. The forest remembers those who listen. As they read it, a soft tapping began at first on the walls, then the windows, then the roof. When they fled, they heard a deep, rasping laugh echoing to the trees behind them. No one knows if the cabin still stands. Some say it was swallowed by the forest long ago, buried under fallen branches and moss. Others claim it moves, appearing in different parts of the woods, depending on who seeks it. What is certain is that the area around Gifford Pinchot remains heavy with unease. Ravens still gather in impossible numbers near the old trails, watching silently from the treetops. Those who visit the forest at night sometimes report hearing wings overhead, though the sky above them remains empty. And if they linger too long near where Ravina S. Rest once stood, they may feel something brush past them, a cold and unseen, like the wind carrying the whisper of forgotten spell. Even now, when fog blankets the forest and the moonlight filters weakly through the trees, the sound of a single Ravina S. cry cuts through the silence. It echoes once, then twice, before fading into the dark. Some say Ida S. just a bird. Others swear Ida S. Abel Corbin himself, the last echo of a man who reached too far into the shadows and became one. Those who hear it often leave the forest quickly, without looking back, for fear they might see a shadow spreading its wings behind them, ready to follow wherever they go. Hidden deep within the thick evergreens of the Mount Baker wilderness lies Mossy Creek Cabin, a structure so cloaked in the Turia as overgrowth that it nearly disappears from sight. Time and forest have swallowed its roof beneath a carpet of moss, ivy crawling up the weathered boards, and ferns sprouting from the porch steps. The narrow dirt road leading to it is almost forgotten, overrun with roots and shaded by towering firs. From the outside, the cabin looks abandoned for decades, and yet those who have ventured near know that something within still stirs. The first thing visitors notice is the cold. It seeps through the trees long before the cabin comes into view. Even in the middle of summer, when the mountain air should be mild, a sharp chill settles over the clearing. Breath becomes visible, goosebumps rise, and silence replaces every sound of life. Birds stop singing, and the only noise left is the soft trickle of the creek winding behind the cabin named Mossy Creek, from which the place takes its name. That creek, too, has a reputation. Locals say the water runs colder than any other in the area, and sometimes, when the fog hangs low, shapes can be seen moving beneath its surface that are not fish or stones. Stories of Mossy Creek cabins stretch back to the late 1800s, during the height of Mount Baker's mining rush. Dozens of men came to the region, drawn by rumors of gold and silver buried in the rock. They carved rough camps into the wilderness and lived in isolation for months, braving brutal winters and long stretches of silence. Mossy Creek served as a key water source for one of those camps, a small group of miners who built a wooden cabin near the stream for shelter. But the mountain is not kind to the greedy. One night, an unexpected storm rolled through, turning the creek into a torrent of icy water. The hillside above their camp collapsed under the weight of rain and mud, burying several miners alive. Only one man was pulled from the wreckage, a delirious, half-frozen, and clutching a small leather satchel. When rescuers opened it, they found only wet earth inside. He muttered about the creek keeping what was owed before dying days later. The camp was abandoned, and the forest slowly reclaimed what was left. By the early 1900s, only the cabin remained, leaning but still standing. Hikers and explorers who stumbled upon it often felt as though they were being watched. Some described whispers coming from the trees, a low, fragmented voices that seemed to call names or utter warnings. Others claimed to see fleeting movement reflected in the cabina's dusty windows, even when no one stood inside. When they turned to look directly, the glass showed only their own pale faces staring back. The most common apparition reported is that of a man dressed in old mining clothes. Witnesses describe him as tall, with a weathered face, his shirt torn and covered in dirt. He is often seen wandering near the creek at dusk, moving slowly as though searching for something lost. But before anyone can call out or approach, he vanishes, and not fading or running, but simply gone, as if he was never there at all. Local legend ties the spirit to one of the miners who perished in the landslide. Some believe his ghost returns to check the creek, hoping to recover what he lost. Others say he is not searching, but guarding the area, ensuring that no one disturbs the ground where his friends were buried. One account, passed down through families in the Mount Baker foothills, tells of a prospector who tried to dig near the creek in the 1930s. He camped near the cabin for several nights, ignoring the warnings of nearby residents. On his final night, a storm broke out, sudden and violent. In the morning, his tent was found shredded, and the ground around it littered with boot prints leading in circles. The prospector himself was never seen again. The only thing left was his pickaxe, bent and rusted, lying half-buried beside the creek. Modern visitors still report strange occurrences. Temperature drops so sudden that frost forms on camera lenses, the smell of wet earth rising when no rain has fallen, and faint lights flickering near the tree-line. The smell of wet earth rising when no rain has fallen, and faint lights flickering near the tree-line. Faint lights flickering near the tree-line. Some say that if you stand quietly by the water after dark, you can hear Mina's voices echoing faintly across the current, a laughter, coughing, and the clang of metal tools striking stone. Laughter, coughing, and the clang of metal tools striking stone. One hiker described it as if the sound of work, continuing long after day, ended. Inside the cabin, time seemed suspended. The floorboards creak underfoot, the air heavy with dampness. The floorboards creak underfoot, the air heavy with dampness. The air heavy with dampness. A rusted stove leans in the corner, and a single chair still stands upright beside it. On the back wall, faint scratch marks mar the wood, as though someone clawed at it long ago. Paranormal investigators we visited claimed their equipment malfunctions within minutes, batteries draining completely, compasses spinning wildly. One even captured what appeared to be a handprint forming on the window of fog glass, though no one else was near. Despite its eerie reputation, Mossy Creek Cabin draws the curious. Urban explorers, ghost hunters, and local thrill seekers all try to find it, though many never succeed. The forest seems to hide it, paths shifting and landmarks disappearing. Those who do find it often speak of an overwhelming urge to leave, as if something unseen presses against their chest, warning them not to stay after dark. Locals believe the spirits of the miners are forever bound to the cabin, and the creek a trap between the mountain they loved and the greed that destroyed them. They say that when fog drifts through the trees and settles low to the ground, the veil between worlds grows thin. The dead gather near Mossy Creek, reliving their final night, whispering to one another in the dark. To this day, few dare to linger long near that forgotten bend in the forest. The chill in the air feels like a breath at your neck, and every ripple in the water seems to move with purpose. Whether Ida's grief, guilt, or goal to hold them there, the miners of Mossy Creek have never truly left. And as the mountain continues to rise, silent and unmoving, their restless shadows still roam the banks, guarding the secret they died to keep. Guarding the secret they died to keep. Whispering Pine's cabin lies deep within the dense forest of the North Cascades, a place where sunlight rarely touches the forest floor, and the wind carries secrets through the towering pines. The cabin itself is small and weathered, built from dark timber that has darkened further over decades. Its windows are clouded with age, and the creaking porch sags under the weight of moss and pine needles. Few travelers stumble upon it by accident, for the narrow trail leading to the cabin is barely visible, winding to the shadows of the forest like a forgotten path. Those who do find it quickly realize that the cabin is more than a bandonita. It is alive with a presence that is both silent and watchful. Visitors consistently report the same strange experiences. Even on the sunniest days, a chill hangs in the air around the cabin, as though the forest itself breathes cold. Footsteps echo along the wooden porch at night, slow and deliberate. Yet when anyone steps outside to investigate, the sound vanishes into the darkness. Doors and shutters, long rusted and stiff, sometimes move on their own. Lights flicker unpredictably inside the cabin, despite no electricity running through its walls. Some explorers speak of faint murmurs, voices layered over one another, whispering words that cannot be understood but somehow convey panic and despair. The stories trace back nearly a century to a family who lived in the cabin during one of the harshest winters the North Cascades had ever seen. Snowstorms were frequent and brutal, cutting off all access to nearby towns and leaving the family isolated for weeks at a time. According to legend, one particularly severe storm trapped them inside the cabin for days. Supplies dwindled, and the family grew desperate. Neighbors reported seeing the faint glow of lanterns flickering through the trees during the storm. But by the time rescuers arrived, the family had vanished. No bodies were found, no tracks in the snow leading away from the cabin. Only the small wooden structure standing silent against the storm. Since that night, Whispering Pines Cabin has been a hot spot for paranormal activity. Guests often report feeling a sudden wave of anxiety as soon as they step onto the property, as if unseen eyes are watching every move. Some say that on particularly cold nights, faint shadows appear in windows, moving as if retracing the familiar final hours. Others have heard the desperate cries of children echoing through the pines, faint and fleeting, vanishing as quickly as they arrive. The wind through the trees often carries these whispers farther than one would expect, making it impossible to distinguish them from the natural sounds of the forest. Several accounts mention that objects inside the cabin shift inexplicably. Chairs tilt slightly, cups slide across tables, and doors that were previously closed are found ajar in morning. Visitors report feeling cold. Invisible hands brush against their shoulders, particularly near the fireplace where the family once gathered for warmth. Some say the temperature drops so suddenly it takes their breath away, leaving frost on window panes even during milder months. Photographs taken inside the cabin sometimes reveal shadowy figures in the corners, unexplainable orbs of light hovering near the ceiling, or misty shapes that resemble human forms, though no one was present when the pictures were taken. One of the more chilling phenomena occurs on the porch at night. Travelers often hear slow, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth across the boards. Sometimes, the pacing is accompanied by faint voices murmuring in sorrow or panic. Those who try to confront the sound usually find nothing, yet a lingering sense of dread remains, pressing against their chest. Some visitors claim that the footsteps mimic their own movement, as if the spirits are aware of intruders and respond to every step. A few hikers have even reported hearing whispers calling their names, as though the lost family is reaching across time, trying to make contact with the living. The cabina-esque isolation adds to its eerie reputation. The forest itself seems to guard it, trees leaning in as if observing. Wind twisting through the pines, carrying voices from beyond. Some explorers report strange lights moving through the trees. Others feel the oppressive weight of being watched, a sensation that is strongest during winter months, when the forest is quiet and the snow muffles all other sound. Despite the haunting, Whispering Pines Cabin draws those intrigued by the paranormal. Ghost hunters, adventurers, and curious travelers brave the isolated trail, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unexplained. However, almost all report a deep unease, and many leave before nightfall, unable to ignore the oppressive presence that fills the air. Some locals warn that lingering too long is dangerous, as the spirits are said to repeat their final moments endlessly, and those who overstayed might become part of the cycle themselves. Even today, the cabin stands as a silent monument to the past, a dark timbered shadow among the towering pines. The wind continues to carry whispers through the trees, and visitors continue to feel the cold, unseen presence of the vanished family. Those who pass by the clearing report glimpses of shadows, faint cries, and the sense that the cabin itself is alive with memory. Whispering Pines cabin remains a place where the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin, and the forest around it holds the echoes of a tragedy that never truly ended. In the North Cascades, on quiet nights when the wind shifts and the pine needles rustle, the stories tell us that the family still walks the cabin, trapped by the storm, their whispers drifting endlessly through the forest, repeating the desperate struggle of a winter that never truly passed. Shadow Lake Cabin sits quietly on the edge of a dense forest, its weathered logs reflecting faintly in the dark, still waters of Lake Wenatchee. Surrounded by towering evergreens, the cabin feels isolated, even during the day, and as the sun dips below the horizon, the atmosphere becomes heavy with silence. Travelers who stumble upon it quickly sense that something is not ordinary here. The air is often cooler than the surrounding forest, and a subtle, almost imperceptible tension hangs around the cabin, as if unseen eyes are watching every move. The air is often cooler than the surrounding forest, and a subtle, almost imperceptible tension hangs around the cabin, as if unseen eyes are watching every move. Those who spend time at Shadow Lake Cabin report unusual and chilling experiences. One of the most commonly cited phenomena involves the lake itself. Visitors claim to see figures moving in the reflection of the water, figures that vanish when they turn to look directly at the shore. Some have described shadowy forms gliding across the surface, as though walking on the water, only to disappear without a trace. On quiet nights, the occasional ripple appears on the lake, even when the wind is still, giving the impression of someone unseen moving just beneath the surface. The cabina's interior is no less unsettling. Doors that were firmly closed often slam open without warning, startling anyone inside. Windows creak as though tapped by invisible hands, and faint footsteps echo across the wooden floors when no one is present. Visitors have reported hearing soft singing drifting in from the surrounding woods, a melody that is both haunting and sorrowful, carrying an emotional weight that is impossible to ignore. Some explorers where they have felt cold, unseen hands brush against their arms or shoulders, particularly near the fireplace and the lakeside windows. Local legend traces a haunting to a tragic story from decades ago. A young couple once lived in the cabin during a particularly harsh winter. They were known for their love of the lake, often rowing across its surface in the warm months, but beneath the surface of their relationship, tension simmered. One stormy evening, a bitter quarrel escalated while they were out on the lake in a small rowboat. Accounts suggest that the argument ended in tragedy when the boat capsized and both drowned before anyone could reach them. Ever since, Shadow Lake Cabin and the surrounding woods have been steeped in spectral activity. Visitors often describe encounters that seem to reenact those final, fateful moments. On stormy nights, some have witnessed shadowy figures arguing in the cabina's living room, their forms fleeting but unmistakable. Others see silhouettes moving on the lake itself, rowing or flailing, as though trapped in a loop of that tragic evening. The singing, some say, is the female spirit calling out to her lost love, her voice weaving through the trees and across the water. Many who spend more than a few hours in the cabin report a growing sense of sorrow, as though the atmosphere itself carries the grief of the young couple. Even during the day, Shadow Lake Cabin has its unsettling moments. Reflections in the windows sometimes reveal movement behind the observer, shadows stretching across the forested grounds, or sudden glimpses of figures standing silently near the water's edge. Furniture inside the cabin shifts subtly, objects appearing in places where they were never placed, and doors seem open just enough to suggest that something or something is entering or leaving. Photographs taken within the cabin occasionally capture faint shapes or misty silhouettes that cannot be explained by natural light or shadows. The lake itself remains central to haunting. Some explorers report hearing splashes or the scrape of oars even when the water is still. On certain nights, the surface of the lake seems to glow faintly, reflecting forms that vanish when approached. A few have described seeing ghostly faces appearing in the water, their expressions twisted in fear or sorrow, as if the spirits of the drowned couple are reaching across the divide between life and death. The forest surrounding the cabin also plays a role in the eerie atmosphere. Branches sway as if moved by invisible hands, and footsteps echo along hidden trails. Branches sway as if moved by invisible hands, and footsteps echo along hidden trails, never revealing their source. Faint singing or whispers sometimes come from deep within the woods, drawing the curious or unsuspecting closer to the edge of the lake. Some visitors have felt compelled to step toward the water, only to sense an invisible force urging them back. Some visitors have felt compelled to step toward the water, only to sense an invisible force urging them back, a chilling reminder of the dangers that claimed the young couple so long ago. Shadow Lake Cabin remains a destination for those fascinated by the paranormal, but few stay long after nightfall. The weight of the haunting, the cold that seeps into bones, and the constant, watchful presence of the lost spirits make prolonged visits uncomfortable, even frightening. Locals advise caution, warning that the couple's spirits may still be bound to the lake, their grief and anger replaying that fateful quarrel, and that anyone who lingers too long risks becoming part of the ongoing story. Even today, when mist rises from Lake Wenatchee and the forest is still, the cabina's reflection shimmers with more than timber and glass. Shadowy figures drift across the water, doors creak, and faint singing drifts through the trees, where the lost couple-as spirits reenact their final moments, and where visitors can sense, if only for a fleeting instant, the sorrow that refuses to leave. Frostbite Cabin sits deep in the Mount St. Helens wilderness, far from any main road and surrounded by dense evergreens dusted with snow. Even in daylight, the cabin exudes an unsettling stillness, but as winter descends and the forest becomes blanketed in ice and frost, the isolation deepens. Travelers who seek the cabin often arrive to an unnatural quiet, where even the wind seems to hesitate, and the snow-covered landscape feels alive with unseen eyes. The air carries a biting chill that seeps into clothing and bone, and many who step inside the cabin report an immediate sense that they are not alone. Visitors consistently describe the presence of phantom footsteps outside, crunching rhythmically in the fresh snow. These sounds sometimes circle the cabin, stopping and starting with no discernible source. On more than one occasion, hikers have glanced through frosted windows and claimed to see a lone figure in a parka, standing motionless and staring in silence. The figure vanishes the moment anyone approaches the glass, leaving only the faint impression of human shape and the lingering frost on the panes. Inside Frostbite Cabin, the air feels colder than the winter outside. Candles that are lit to provide warmth and light often extinguish themselves without explanation, and even gas stoves sputter as though resisting ignition. Some visitors report sudden gusts of frigid air sweeping through rooms with no open windows, causing them to shiver despite heavy winter gear. Occasionally, furniture shifts subtly, chairs sliding slightly or logs in the fireplace rearranging themselves, leaving a sensation that the cabin is being quietly observed. Whispered warnings are a recurring phenomenon. Some explorers hear faint voices carried on the wind outside, urging caution or urging them back from the forest trails. Others report low, guttural murmurs from within the cabin, words that cannot be made out but carry a sense of urgency. Those who venture near the frozen windows claim they feel the presence of the parka-clad figure even when unseen, a heavy gaze following their movements through the cabin. Legend ties the haunting of Frostbite Cabin to a man who perished decades ago. In a violent snowstorm, he had been a solitary trapper and woodsman, known for his resilience, but also for his tendency to travel alone in the most dangerous conditions. One winter, caught unprepared in a sudden blizzard, he succumbed to the cold and never returned. Since then, locals say his spirit lingers in the wilderness, bound to the forest and the cabin he once used as shelter. Some believe he roams to protect travelers, while others insist he warns those who tread too close to danger. His method's chilling but well-intentioned. Explorers have recounted moments where the ghostly figure seems to interact with the environment. Footprints appear in the snow that do not match their own, sometimes forming paths leading away from steep cliffs or frozen rivers. Windows fog with icy patterns that spell out shapes resembling hands or figures. Visitors report hearing the soft rustle of clothing in the wind, as if someone is moving nearby, yet when they turn, nothing is there. The line between warning and haunting is thin, and the intensity of the experience often depends on the weather. Stormy nights amplify the presence, while calm, clear days render the cabin almost ordinary, though never entirely devoid of unease. Even when alone, the cabin feels watched. Cold spots appear in the corners of rooms, lingering longer than natural drafts could account for. Some visitors feel invisible hands brush along their arms or shoulders, subtle yet unmistakable, as if the spirit is guiding them towards safety or cautioning them away from hidden dangers outside. Footsteps echo from the loft above or the entryway, though the cabina's upper level has been sealed for years. Photographs taken within the cabin occasionally capture fleeting shapes or mists that cannot be explained by shadows, adding further proof of those who believe the cabin is haunted. The forest surrounding Frostbite Cabin contributes to its ominous reputation. Snow-laden trees creak as if groaning under invisible weight, and branches often sway when the wind is calm. Trail markers sometimes disappear or are obscured by snowdrifts, only to reappear perfectly aligned, as though unseen hands are adjusting them. Those who venture into the woods at dusk or during a storm occasionally report glimpsing the parka-clad figures silently walking along ridgelines, vanishing when approached. Some hikers swear they have heard urgent, muffled shouts carried across the snow, voices warning of cliffs, thin ice, or hidden crevices. Despite its terrifying reputation, Frostbite Cabin attracted adventurers and paranormal enthusiasts. Many come seeking to experience the haunting firsthand, though few remain long after nightfall. The combination of isolation, cold, and spectral presence creates an environment that is as psychologically taxing as it is mysterious. Visitors are advised to exercise caution, respect the cabin, and heed any warnings, for the spirit who patrols Frostbite Cabin is said to be ever vigilant, watching over the forest while remaining tethered to the snowy wilderness where he died. Outside, footprints crunch across the snow, figures appear briefly in the frosted windows, and whispers drift through the trees. Those who listen closely may sense a presence moving just beyond Site A. Black Bear Cabin sits deep in the dense forest of the Olympic Peninsula, shrouded in towering evergreens and a perpetual mist that seems to cling to the ground. The cabin's weathered timbers and moss-covered roof give a forlorn, almost forgotten appearance. Yet those who stumble upon it quickly realize it is far from abandoned. Even in daylight, the air around the cabin feels heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, and travelers report a constant unease as if unseen eyes are watching from the shadowed woods. The cabin has a reputation that draws both the curious and the wary, a place where the veil between the living and the spectral seems exceptionally thin. Visitors to Black Bear Cabin frequently report disturbances that defy explanation. Furniture has been seen to shift slightly on its own, chairs tilting as though someone had just risen, and doors creak open silently without wind or force. Some guests recount moments when they turn their backs for a single second only to find the floorboards bearing new, unexplained scratches or objects subtly rearranged from their original places. Visitors to Black Bear Cabin frequently report disturbances that defy explanation. Furniture has been seen to shift slightly on its own, chairs tilting as though someone had just risen, and doors creak open silently without wind or force. These subtle movements, combined with the ever-present scent of pine and earth, create an atmosphere where the ordinary and the uncanny are impossible to separate. The forest surrounding the cabin contributes to its eerie character. Many have claimed to see glowing eyes peering from the shadows, appearing momentarily between the trees before vanishing, as if dissolving into the darkness itself. The eyes are often described as amber or golden, like those of a wild animal, but unnervingly intelligent, watching with deliberate intent. Footsteps are frequently heard outside, crunching over fallen branches and dry leaves. Yet when approached, nothing is ever found. On fog-laden nights, some guests swear they have seen shadowy figures moving through the trees, human in shape but unervingly silent, dissolving into the mist before anyone can reach them. Whispers are another common occurrence. They drift to the cabin at odd hours, often indistinguishable words that sound like warnings or urgent commands. Occasionally, a low, guttural growl accompanies the whispers, resonating from somewhere nearby but impossible to locate. Some explorers claim that the cabin is not just haunted by a human presence, but by something darker, a force tied to the wild and the unknown. The sounds it growls, creaks, and whispers often seem to follow visitors as they move through the cabin or step outside into the woods. Local legend traces the hauntings back decades. A hunter once sought refuge in Black Bear Cabin during a fierce winter blizzard. Reports suggest he never emerged alive, succumbing to the storm that raged around the isolated forest. Since then, the story says his spirit has remained, forever bound to cabin and surrounding wilderness. Some believe the hunter-esque ghost is protective, guiding travelers away from hidden dangers in the forest or warning them of approaching storms. Others whisper of a darker force, a restless presence tied to the cabin itself, manifesting in the glowing eyes and low growls that terrify those who visit. Inside the cabin, the air feels almost alive with cold spots and sudden gusts of wind. Candles that visitors light often extinguish themselves unexpectedly, and some report the sensation of a heavy presence pressing near their shoulders or behind them. Shadows shift unnaturally in corners, and reflections in windows sometimes reveal fleeting figures standing outside, watching silently before disappearing. Many claim the feeling of being observed never fully fades, even during bright daylight hours. The surrounding would only heighten the cabina-esque mysteries. Paths leading away from the cabin often appear shorter than they should, sometimes curving or doubling back in ways that disorient visitors. Snow or rain can obscure footprints, yet the next morning new prints appear, leading in directions that seem impossible. Wildlife seems to behave strangely near the cabin as well. Birds remain silent, and animals avoid the immediate area, contributing to a suffocating sense of isolation and unease. Despite the fear it inspires, Black Bear Cabin continues to draw visitors. Paranormal enthusiasts, hikers, and adventurous travelers seek it out, often hoping to witness the strange occurrences firsthand. Few spend more than a single night, however, as a combination of isolation, cold, and unsettling activity proves overwhelming. Even brief visits leave long-lasting impressions, the sound of low growls echoing through the forest, the sudden flick of a chair, the cold draft sweeping through an empty room, or the unshakable feeling of being watched from the shadows. The dense Olympic forest conceals secrets older than the cabin itself, and the spirit of the hunter, or the darker force tied to his fate, continues its eternal vigil. Visitors leave the cabin with stories of whispers in the wind, glowing eyes in the trees, and a sense that some presence lingers just beyond sight, whether a protective spirit, a restless soul, or something far more sinister. The legends of Black Bear Cabin endure, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the Olympic Peninsula. Ironwood Cabin sits quietly in the foothills of Mount Rainier, surrounded by towering evergreens and the constant mist that drifts down from the mountain slopes. The cabin, built of weathered timber and reinforced with ironwood beams, has long been a place of isolation. Its rustic charm draws hikers and travelers seeking solitude, yet those who stay often leave with stories that speak of something far from peaceful. Even during bright daylight, the air around Ironwood Cabin feels heavy, almost thick with anticipation, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Visitors often sense that they are being watched, though no eyes are visible among the surrounding pines. Inside the cabin, unexplained activity is common. Guests report feeling cold hands brush against their shoulders or backs, though no one else is present. Furniture sometimes shifts slightly, as if moved by an invisible force, and doors open or close without any discernible cause. Shadows appear in corners and along walls, often moving independently of the light sources that should cast them. Some visitors have witnessed fleeting figures in doorways or reflected in windows, only to turn and find the spaces empty. These phenomena occur at any hour, but they are particularly intense in the late evening when the surrounding forest darkens. When the surrounding forest darkens and the wind whispers through the trees. Whispers are another frequent experience at Ironwood Cabin. Low murmurs drift through the rooms, often indistinct but persistent. Some guests report hearing their names being spoken softly, carried through the still air as though the cabin itself were alive. Occasionally, the whispers take on a more urgent tone, seeming to issue warnings, though their meaning remains elusive. Even when visitors speak aloud, the murmurs continue as if answering, an eerie dialogue that cannot be interrupted or traced to any human source. The history of Ironwood Cabin contributes to its mysterious atmosphere. Its original owner was a prospector who lived in the cabin during the early 20th century, searching the forests and foothills for hidden veins of precious minerals. Locals recall that he vanished without a trace, leaving behind only his cabin and belongings. Some say that he never truly left, that his spirit became bound to the timber and stone, watching those who enter, silently warning them of dangers both seen and unseen. Over the years, travelers have attributed the strange happenings in the cabin to Prospector S. lingering presence, a restless soul tethered to the place he once called home. Even the surrounding landscape seems to participate in the Cabina S. eerie energy. Forest paths leading to the cabin sometimes appear shorter or longer than they should, with trees seeming to shift slightly when no one is looking. At times, visitors report glimpses of a man in old prospecting clothes walking along the ridges or between the trees, vanishing when approached. Animal sounds grow strangely muted near the cabin, and birds often fall silent in a radius surrounding the structure. On foggy mornings, strange lights have been seen flickering between pines, moving in ways no ordinary fire or reflection could explain. Inside, the air often shifts abruptly. Guests have experienced sudden cold spots that make breath visible indoors, despite warm temperatures outside. Candles and lanterns flicker or extinguish themselves, leaving rooms in darkness for moments that feel far longer than they are. Some visitors report a sensation of being gently guided or restrained by unseen hands, sometimes steering them away from doors or stairways, at other times preventing them from leaving certain areas. These interactions, subtle and fleeting, contribute to the sense that the cabin is alive in some inexplicable way, responding to those who enter. Many travelers who spend the night at Ironwood Cabin describe feeling a constant awareness, a sense that something is observing their every move. Footsteps are heard in rooms above or beside them, though the cabin is otherwise empty. Occasionally, a low humming or murmuring resonates through the walls, resembling nothing so much as a voice carrying through the timber. Guests awaken in the middle of the night to see shadows stretching along the walls, only to vanish when they attempt to focus on them. The cumulative effect is an overwhelming sense of presence, tangible yet untouchable. Despite its chilling reputation, Ironwood Cabin continues to draw visitors, hikers, paranormal enthusiasts, and those curious about the unknown. Few spend more than a single night, however, as the combination of isolation, cold, and persistent activity proves difficult to endure. Those who leave often recount long-lasting impressions. The sensation of invisible hands, fleeting shadows, whisper warnings, and the unshakable feeling of being watched. Ironwood Cabin endures as a place where the natural world and the supernatural intertwine. Its forested surroundings, weathered timber, and historical mysteries create an environment thick with unseen energy. Whether the phenomena are the result of Prospector S. restless spirit, lingering memories of the past, or some darker force rooted in the forest itself, the cabin maintains its power over the living. Travelers leave with stories of whispers in the wind, shadows moving in corners, and cold touches that linger far longer than the night itself. For those who enter Ironwood Cabin, the legend of the vanished prospector remains vividly alive, a haunting presence that watches silently from the walls. Dead Man's Cabin sits deep in the Cascades, nestled among dense evergreens and moss-covered rocks near Stevens Pass. The cabin itself is small and weathered, built from rough-hewn timber and surrounded by thick underbrush. Its name carries a dark history. Decades ago, a hiker's body was discovered in the nearby woods, his death mysterious and sudden. Since then, the cabin has earned a reputation among locals and adventurers as a place where the veil between the living and the dead feels impossibly thin. Even during bright days, the forest surrounding the cabin seems to hold its breath, and the air carries a subtle chill, as if warning visitors of the events that unfolded here. Inside the cabin, unexplained phenomena are commonplace. Guests report hearing phantom footsteps echoing across the wooden floors, often accompanied by the creak of stairs or the scraping of furniture, though no one else is present. Doors swing open or lock themselves without explanation, trapping visitors in rooms or leaving them to step cautiously through corridors they believed empty. Lights flicker intermittently, lanterns sway as if moved by invisible hands, and shadows seem to stretch and twist along walls in ways that defy natural physics. Many who have spent the night describe the sensation of being watched, a presence pressing close yet invisible, manifesting in fleeting glimpses of a figure at the edge of vision. Disembodied voices are another common experience. Low murmurs echo through the cabin, sometimes indistinct, other times calling out names with unnerving clarity. Some visitors have reported hearing questions whispered in a broken, urgent tone, or the repeated utterance of a single word, a warning, a plea, or perhaps a memory of the hiker himself. The voices often seem to emanate from the walls or floorboards, impossible to locate, creating a sense of unease that grows steadily the longer one remains inside. Occasionally, these whispers are accompanied by a cold gust that sweeps through the cabin, sudden and biting, as if the air itself carries a Hikara-esque presence. The surrounding woods amplify the cabina-esque spectral activity. Visitors who step outside at dusk or nighttime report glimpses of shadowy figures moving among the trees, pausing briefly before vanishing into darkness. The wind often carries strange sounds and muffled footsteps on dry leaves, the snap of branches, or the low hum of a voice drifting through the pines. Some have felt unseen hands brush against their arms, guiding or restraining them, creating a sensation that they are being led along paths they might not otherwise take. Trails that appear clear during the day can feel distorted at night, with familiar landmarks seeming to shift subtly, adding to the disorienting nature of the cabina-esque surroundings. The history of the hiker contributes to the legends surrounding Dead Manna-esque cabin. He was a lone adventurer, known to explore remote trails and cascades, often disappearing for days at a time. When his body was found near the cabin, no one could determine exactly what had happened, and rumors quickly grew. Some said he had succumbed to the elements, others whispered of foul play or supernatural forces. Over time, his spirit became entwined with the cabin and the surrounding forest, haunting the very paths he once walked. Locals speak of him as a lost soul, endlessly wandering, unable to leave the site of his final moments. Even during daylight, visitors feel a strange weight upon entering the cabin. The air seems thicker, and shadows appear deeper and more pronounced than the sun alone should create. Some have glimpsed a figure standing by a window, gazing out toward the forest, only to turn and find nothing there. Inside, personal items such as books, lanterns, or blankets sometimes move subtly, as if handled by invisible hands. Others report hearing the distinct crunch of footsteps on the porch, stopping abruptly when they attempt to investigate. These phenomena contribute to a growing sense that the cabin itself is alive with memories and presence, a place where the living and the dead intersect. Guests who spend the night often awaken to these strange occurrences. Some have heard the Hikara-esque voice calling out warnings about paths or dangers in the forest. Lights flicker overhead, and the temperature drops sharply in certain areas, forming a cold corridor that winds unpredictably through the cabin. The sensations are physical as well as psychological, creating an experience that lingers long after one leaves Dead Manna-esque cabin. Despite the cabina-esque chilling reputation, visitors continue to be drawn by curiosity and the allure of the unknown. Hikers, paranormal enthusiasts, and those seeking solitude come to experience the cabin firsthand. Many leave with stories of whispered voices, shadows moving independently of light, phantom footsteps, and the unshakable feeling of being followed. The legend of the lost hiker remains vividly alive, an ever-present reminder of the wilderness' danger and cabina' haunted history. Dead Manna's cabin endures as a place where the natural world and the supernatural intersect. Its forested surroundings, creaking timber, and tragic past combine to create an atmosphere thick with unseen energy. Travelers leave with memories of whispered warnings, fleeting shadows, and the sensation of being watched, carrying with them the story of a hiker forever lost, yet eternally present. Owl's Hollow Cabin sits secluded in the dense forest of the Mount Baker area, surrounded by towering evergreens and thick underbrush that sways in the wind like restless spirits. The cabin is small, built of aged timber that creaks under the weight of years and storms, its roof darkened by moss and rain. Even from a distance, it exudes an unsettling stillness, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Visitors who approach the cabin often notice the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl. Yet even these familiar forest sounds seem distorted, carrying an unnatural weight. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is heavy with unseen energy. Many who have stayed report hearing footsteps echoing across the worn wooden floors, sometimes slow and deliberate, sometimes quick, as though someone unseen is pacing the rooms in agitation or anticipation. Furniture occasionally shifts without cause as chairs tilt, books slide from shelves, and doors swing open or shut with no wind or human intervention. The sensation of being watched is pervasive, and visitors often describe a subtle pressure against their backs, as if an invisible presence is standing close behind them, observing their every move. The most unnerving sounds, however, come at night. Owl calls pierce the darkness outside, yet they echo strangely, bouncing unnaturally against the walls of the cabin. Some report hearing faint, disembodied laughter, soft and hollow, drifting from corners where shadows seem to gather. Whispers are another common experience, sometimes unintelligible, sometimes forming brief, eerie phrases a warning, a question, or an urgent plea. The air itself feels charged during these moments, cold and dense, and a sudden chill often spreads through the cabin, raising goosebumps and amplifying the sense of unease. Visitors have occasionally glimpsed shadowy figures moving at the edge of vision. One moment a corner seems empty, the next a shape flickers briefly, vanishing before it can be fully seen. Sometimes, reflections in dusty windows reveal a figure standing behind them, only for the space to appear vacant when they turn around. These apparitions are often accompanied by the soft creak of floorboards, or the low whisper of a voice, making it clear that whatever lingers in Owl's Hollow Cabin is aware of intruders, and may be trying to communicate, or perhaps simply warn them to leave. Decades ago, a caretaker lived and worked in the cabin, tending the surrounding land, and keeping the small property in order. One winter, during a violent storm, he disappeared without a trace. Some say he succumbed to the elements, others whisper that foul play was involved, and still others believe the forest itself claimed him. In the years since, visitors claim that his spirit remains, bound to the cabin and its surrounding woods. It is said he watches over property, alert to intruders, and manifests to the sounds of hooting, footsteps, laughter, and whispers to warn anyone who comes too close. The cabina-esque environment amplifies these spectral occurrences. Windows are often fogged inexplicably, shadows deepen unnaturally, and even the natural creaking of the wood under shifting weather can sound like deliberate movement. Shadows deepen unnaturally, and even the natural creaking of the wood under shifting weather can sound like deliberate movement. And even the natural creaking of the wood under shifting weather can sound like deliberate movement. Guests frequently describe moments when the temperature drops suddenly, a cold gust passing through a hallway or room even on a calm night. A cold gust passing through a hallway or room even on a calm night. Some claim they felt hands brush past them or a subtle push, guiding them away from certain areas. The combination of auditory, tactile, and visual phenomena creates a persistent sensation that the caretaker is both present and aware, walking the cabin silently, unseen yet palpably near. Creates a persistent sensation that the caretaker is both present and aware, walking the cabin silently, unseen yet palpably near. Walking the cabin silently, unseen yet palpably near. Outside the cabin, the forest surrounding Aula S Hollow adds to its mystique and fear. Visitors report hearing hoots that seem closer than any actual owl, often following them as they navigate the property. Occasionally, glimpses of a dark figure between the trees are reported, disappearing whenever approached. Some hikers have turned back, unnerved by the sensation that they're being watched from every direction. The combination of the dense forest, the isolation of the cabin, and the Karataka's lingering presence creates an environment where ordinary sounds and sights are transformed into supernatural encounters. Despite its reputation, Owl's Hollow Cabin continues to attract adventurous visitors and paranormal enthusiasts. Many come seeking the thrill of encountering the unknown, staying overnight to experience firsthand the strange sounds, shadows, and sensations reported over the years. Some leave with only stories of unexplained noises and fleeting shadows, while others report full encounters with whispers, laughter, and the unnerving feeling of being followed. The legend of the caretaker, whether spirit or memory, persists, and his presence seems as strong as ever, reminding all who enter that the cabin and its surrounding woods are far from empty. Aula S Hollow Cabin remains a place where the natural and supernatural intertwine. The aged timber, dense forest, and chilling sounds create a living atmosphere steeped in mystery. Guests leave carrying stories of footsteps in empty rooms, laughter echoing through shadows, and the sense of being silently observed by a presence that refuses to move on. The caretaker, lost to history but eternally bound to the cabin, continues his watch, ensuring that Aula S Hollow is a place where the living never truly walk alone. Tucked away beneath a canopy of dense evergreens and beside a narrow creek whose waters run a deep, unsettling red. Constructed from dark, weathered timbers that creak with the passage of time and the weight of winter snows. The isolation becomes palpable, a haunting rhythm, secrets that few dare to uncover. Visitors to Crimson Creek Cabin often report that the moment they step onto property, the air changes. A subtle chill creeps across the skin, and the forest seems to grow unnaturally silent, as though the wildlife itself has disappeared in anticipation of something unseen. Once inside, the cabin is suffused with an unsettling energy. Candle flames bend and flicker as if drawn toward invisible presences, casting shadows that twist and stretch across the walls. Footsteps echo across the wooden floors when no one else is present, and doors occasionally open or close on their own, slow and deliberate, as if someone unseen is pacing the rooms. Auditory phenomena are among the most frequently reported experiences. Faint singing drift from the forest outside, a soft, mournful melody that seems almost human, yet cannot be traced to any visible source. Whispered voices call from the tree-line, sometimes repeating names or phrases that feel urgent, almost warning intruders to stay away. Even the natural sounds of creek seem altered at night. Its waters, dark and crimson under the moonlight, occasionally produce splashes and ripples with no wind or animal to disturb them, as if something beneath the surface is moving just out of sight. Many who have stayed at Crimson Creek Cabin claim to have glimpsed shadowy figures at the edges of perception. One moment, a corner of the room seems empty. The next, a faint, humanoid form appears, standing silently before vanishing when approached. Reflections in windows and mirrors occasionally reveal a figure watching from behind, only for the space to be empty when the observer turns. Some visitors feel sudden touches, a hand brushing a shoulder or a cold gust against their back, a guiding or warning them, leaving them with the unnerving sense that the cabin is alive with attention, alert to every movement. Local legend explains the cabina as haunting. Decades ago, a woman lived near the creek, known for her care of travelers and those passing through forest. During a violent landslide, she was buried beneath the earth and waters of the Crimson Creek, her life claimed by the unforgiving terrain. Ever since, her spirit is said to linger, bound to the cabin and creek where her death occurred. Visitors claim that she appears to the living both as a warning and as a sentinel, particularly toward those who stray too close to the creek or the surrounding forest. Her presence is described as protective, yet mournful, carrying the sorrow of a life cut tragically short. The cabina-esque atmosphere amplifies the spectral activity. Candles bend toward unseen forms, shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls, and even the faintest creak of timber can sound like a deliberate step. Temperatures often drop suddenly in specific spots, cold enough to make skin prickle and breath visible, yet the surrounding room remains unaffected. Many guests report that the sensation of being watched is constant, pressing and unrelenting, as if an unseen observer tracks their every movement. The combination of visual, auditory, and tactile phenomena creates a vivid impression of the Womana-esque presence, ensuring that Crimson Creek Cabin is experienced as both haunted and alive. Outside the cabin, the forest and creek contribute to the unnerving environment. The crimson waters glint ominously under moonlight, reflecting shapes that vanish when approached. Trees sway and groan even in still air, and the faint singing from a creek or forest seems to follow visitors, drifting between the trees and around the cabin. Drifting between the trees and around the cabin, disappearing into the underbrush when anyone tries to investigate. Makes Crimson Creek Cabin a site where ordinary senses are easily deceived and supernatural explanations gain traction. Crimson Creek Cabin continues to attract those drawn to the paranormal. Ghost hunters, adventurers, and curious travelers come seeking the thrill of encountering the unknown, hoping to witness the strange lights, hear the whispers, or feel the unseen presence themselves. Some leave with stories of faint singing in the dark, candle flames bending toward invisible figures, and sensation of being guided or warned by a spirit. Others report shadowy forms glimpsed from windows, moving just beyond reach, a silent reminder of the Womana-esque eternal watch. Crimson Creek Cabin remains a place where the line between the living and the spirit world feels impossibly thin. The Red Creek, the dense forest, and the cabin itself create a setting that seems to respond to every movement, sound, and gaze. The woman who perished in the landslide continues to haunt the area, her presence felt in whispers, shadows, and the bending of candle flames. Visitors depart with the indelible impression that the cabin and its Crimson Creek are not merely haunted, they are a place where the living and the dead meet, bound together by tragedy, vigilance, and the unyielding power of the forest. Foggy Hollow Cabin sits deep in the forests of Skagit County, a remote retreat perpetually wrapped in thick, rolling mist. Even on clear days, a soft veil of fog seems to cling to the surrounding trees, curling around cabina-esque weathered wooden walls and damp porch. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of pine and earth, and carries a silence that is almost unnatural. Visitors often remark on the stillness, a quiet so profound it feels as if the forest itself is holding its breath. But within that silence lies an undercurrent of unease, a presence that is felt before it is seen. From the moment one steps onto property, Foggy Hollow exudes an unsettling energy. Footsteps are heard crunching on the damp forest floor when no one else is nearby, and the creaking of floorboards inside the cabin often occurs without any human movement. Doors swing open slowly, sometimes letting in the mist that curls unnaturally into the rooms, as if the forest itself is seeping into the cabin. Guests report shadows that move independently of any light source, twisting along walls and across ceilings in impossible ways, giving the impression of silent observers tracking every motion. Auditory phenomena are a hallmark of Foggy Hollow Cabin. Whispered voices echo from the surrounding forest, barely audible but persistent, calling names or speaking in tones that suggest warning or urgency. Sometimes, the whispers are internal, a faint murmur that seems to drift from the walls themselves. At other times, the voices seem to float just outside the cabin, carried on a fog-laden wind, punctuated by the occasional thud of something heavy brushing against the outer walls or the distant creak of a swinging porch door. Guests often feel compelled to follow these sounds, only to find nothing but mist and the dense forest beyond. The legends surrounding the cabin tell a logging crew who met a tragic end decades ago. They had been felling trees near the edge of the Skagit wilderness when a sudden storm struck, causing a catastrophic landslide that claimed several lives. Local lore holds that the Logursa spirits were unable to leave the area, bound to the site of their untimely deaths. Foggy Hollow Cabin, built later in the same clearing, became a focal point for their lingering presence. Visitors often report feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon them, a sensation of being watched in the shadows, an eerie impression that the loggers are both observing and warning the living. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is thick with this lingering energy. Furniture shifts ever so slightly, chairs tilting or tables nudged as if touched by invisible hands. Candle flames bend toward empty corners, flickering and swaying even when the air is still. Some guests describe sudden cold spots, pockets of chill that settle over them without warning, leaving skin pricked with goosebumps. Others recount hearing phantom footsteps pacing along the wooden floors above or outside the walls, a slow, deliberate rhythm that matches the cadence of loggers trudging to the forest in years past. Visual phenomena are no less disturbing. Shadows stretch unnaturally across walls, detaching from the furniture or the flickering candlelight that illuminates them. Figures have been glimpsed in peripheral vision. The tall, broad shapes of men in old logging attire, appearing briefly near windows or standing silently in the forest beyond. When approached directly, these figures vanish, leaving only the mist swirling in the empty air. Guests sometimes report seeing the faint outline of faces, features blurred and shifting, as though the spirits themselves cannot fully manifest in the world of the living. Outside the cabin, the fog transforms the surrounding forest into an otherworldly landscape. The trees loom like silent sentinels, and the forest floor seems to shift in the dim, diffused light. Travelers have heard chainsaws or the chopping of axes in the distance, only to find no one at work. The creek nearby bubbles with a sound that resembles whispered speech, echoing the cabina-esque spectral activity. At night, the fog thickens, muffling normal sounds and amplifying the unearthly ones, leaving guests with the impression that the entire forest is alive and that the Logursa spirits move through it as they once did in life. Despite its haunted reputation, Foggy Hollow Cabin continues to draw those curious about the paranormal. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and hikers exploring the Skagit wilderness seek to experience the unexplainable firsthand. Many leave with stories of whispering voices, cold touches, and shifting shadows that defy natural explanation. Some report being guided away from dangerous spots by unseen hands, while others feel persistent gaze of invisible watchers. A reminder that the Logursa presence is both protective and restless. Foggy Hollow Cabin remains a place where the boundary between the living and the dead feels impossibly thin. The persistent fog, the creaking timbers, and the dense surrounding forest combine. The creaking timbers and the dense surrounding forest combine to create an environment where ordinary perception fails, and the supernatural becomes undeniable. Guests depart with the awareness that the logger spirits still walk the forest, and lingering within the cabin's walls. Their whispers, footsteps, and fleeting shadows serve as a constant reminder that Foggy Hollow is not merely haunted. It is a place where the past refuses to let go, and the living are invited into the silent company of the dead. Their whispers, footsteps, and fleeting shadows serve as a constant reminder that Foggy Hollow is not merely haunted. It is a place where the past refuses to let go, and the living are invited into the silent company of the dead. Their whispers, footsteps, and fleeting shadows serve as a constant reminder that Foggy Hollow is not merely haunted. It is a place where the past refuses to let go, and the living are invited into the silent company of the dead. Raven Creek Cabin sits in a secluded glade within the Olympic Mountains, surrounded by dense evergreens that block out much of the daylight and give the area a permanent shadow quality. The cabin itself is modesta, weathered wood, moss-covered roof, and a stone chimney that seems almost to lean under the weight of time. But it is the stories whispered by those who have visited that give it a reputation far beyond its simple appearance. The air around Raven Creek feels heavy, thick with mist that clings to the trees and drifts into the cabin through cracks in the walls. Visitors often remark on the oppressive quiet, a silence so complete it makes ordinary sound. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owlet, feel amplified, almost deliberate, as if the forest itself were listening. Furniture shifts slightly when no one is present, chairs rocking back and forth as if someone invisible has just stood up. Doors swing shut with no wind, sometimes locking themselves unexpectedly. Windows reflect shapes that should not be there. Guests are described feeling cold, uneven gusts brushing against their necks or shoulders, and at times a sensation that they are being silently observed. The sense of presence is constant, subtle yet insistent, giving the impression that the cabin is never truly empty. Many visitors report seeing black birds perched on the roof or in nearby trees of ravens, always watching. Their movements are unnaturally still, their eyes seeming to follow intruders no matter where they go. At times, the birds appear in impossible numbers, as though they multiply silently, filling the treetops and roofline. Some claim these ravens are more than birds. They are manifestations of Cabina-esque restless spirits, sentinels left behind by the original owner. Local lore tells of the original owner, a recluse who was rumored to have studied dark arts and mystical practices. He lived alone for years, gathering books and artifacts, conducting strange rituals, and leaving behind a trail of mystery. When the man vanished, no trace of him remained. Some believe that his experiments bound spirits to the cabin, tethering them to the land and the structure itself. Today, visitors report those spirits still wander in the rooms and surrounding woods, replaying fragments of their unnatural existence. Auditory phenomena are frequent at Raven Creek Cabin. Guests describe whispers that drift through the hallways, murmurs too low to understand yet unmistakably present. At times, the whispers form for seasonal warnings or beckonings, depending on the listener-esque perception. Footsteps echo along the wooden floors or the creaking stairs even when no one else is inside. Some have reported faint melodic humming, a song that seems to carry through walls and woods alike, and vanishes the moment they try to locate its source. Visual encounters are equally disturbing. Shadowy figures flicker along walls, moving independently of any light source. Guests sometimes catch a reflection of a tall, hooded figure standing behind them in the window, only for it to vanish when they turn around. Others describe seeing apparitions near the fireplace, or in corners where no person could possibly stand. These forms are often fleeting, glimpsed at a momentary reflection, but their presence lingers, leaving visitors with an unnerving feeling of being watched even in empty rooms. Outside, the Cabina-esque forested surroundings add to the sense of isolation and unease. Travelers have reported strange shapes moving between the trunks of, sometimes humanoid, sometimes impossible to define. The black ravens appear again, circling silently or landing on branches just outside windows. Some visitors have seen them vanish into thin air, their wings folding without sound, leaving only an oppressive stillness behind. Despite its reputation, Raven Creek Cabin continues to attract those drawn to the paranormal. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and hikers often venture to the remote location seeking evidence of its spectral activity. Mostly with stories of moving furniture, shadowy reflections, and the constant, chilling awareness of unseen watchers. Some report being guided by invisible hands away from danger, while others feel subtly pushed toward exits, as though the spirits are both protective and territorial. Raven Creek Cabin remains a place where the line between the living and the dead is disturbingly thin. The thick fog, the dense surrounding forest, and the ever-present ravens create an environment in which ordinary perception fails. The whispers, footsteps, and fleeting shadows serve as a constant reminder that the cabin is not merely hauntada, it is a locus of lingering energy, a place where the past refuses to rest. Visitors leave with a lingering sense that the spirits of the cabin, tethered by dark practices long ago, still watch, waiting, and perhaps warning any who dare to enter. Blackwater Cabin sits deep within the Mount Rainier wilderness, surrounded by towering evergreens that blot out sunlight and leave the area in perpetual shadow. The cabin itself is modest of rough-hewn timber walls, a sagging roof, and a stone chimney blackened with aegea, but it is the air around it that gives visitors pause. The forest seems alive with unseen eyes, and the silence is thick, broken only by the distant rustle of branches or the sudden crack of a falling limb. Even on clear days, an unsettling gloom clings to the cabin, hinting at the stories whispered by those who have dared to spend the night. Inside, Blackwater Cabin holds its own secrets. Guests often report chairs shifting slightly when no one is present, doors creaking open or slamming shut without reason, and the unmistakable feeling of a cold draft that seems to come from nowhere. The temperature drops suddenly in certain corners, chilling to the bone, leaving visitors with a shiver that cannot be shaken. Some have felt invisible hands brush against their shoulders, subtle nudges guiding them away from danger or warning them to leave. Visitors hear faint murmurs calling their names or low, incomprehensible chatter from empty corners. The most commonly reported phenomena are auditory. Sometimes the whispers grow urgent, rising to soft cries or warnings, as if the spirits are replaying the fear and confusion of their final moments. Many who have stayed overnight report waking to faint humming or the sound of tools clinking, reminiscent of miners at work, only to find the cabin empty and silent once more. Visual encounters are equally unsettling. Shadowy figures are glimpsed moving among the rafters or standing just outside windows, vanishing when approached. Some visitors have reported seeing men in old mining attire, bent with toil, wandering through the cabin or the surrounding forest. These apparitions appear intent, focused on tasks that no longer exist, as though caught in the perpetual loop of the moments before their deaths. Reflections in the cabina-esque windows sometimes show figures that cannot be accounted for, or fleeting images of people watching silently from the tree line. Even the forest itself seems to move unnaturally, the fog curling and shifting to suggest shapes where none should be. Outside, the wilderness adds to the cabina-esque unnerving reputation. Dense evergreens block the view beyond a few yards, and mist often drifts through trees, thickening into pockets of impenetrable gray. Visitors report seeing figures standing silently among the trees, sometimes watching, sometimes moving toward the cabin, only to vanish when approached. The crunch of snow or leaves underfoot often seems to come from nowhere, and faint lights sometimes appear, hovering between trees or bouncing across distant clearings. At night, the forest feels both claustrophobic and endless, as though the woods themselves are part of the haunting. The history of Blackwater Cabin adds weight to these experiences. Local lore tells of miners who perish in accidents in the Arbia tunnels collapsing, equipment failures, or sudden storms in the wilderness. Some were never recovered, and their last moments were filled with panic, struggle, and fear. It is said that these spirits, tethered to the area by sudden death and unfinished business, continue to replay the final hours of their lives. Guests describe the uncanny sensation of witnessing shadows enact these past events, footsteps echoing the panic of the miners, tools swinging as though striking rock, and muffled shouts carried by the wind. Visitors to Blackwater Cabin often speak of an oppressive feeling of being watched, a weight on the chest or shoulders that is impossible to shake. Some claim the spirits interact selectively, guiding those they see as respectful or threatening, nudging explorers away from dangerous areas or manifesting more aggressively if provoked. The forest, the cabin, and the shadows seem to exist together in a liminal space where the dead are trapped and the living feel the pull of unseen presences. Even for the bravest, the night at Blackwater Cabin is unforgettable. Whispers rise and fall, shadows dart across walls, and the occasional chill signals the approach of something unseen. Guests often awake at odd hours to chairs moved, doors ajar, or the sensation of summoning or something just standing close by. Though the cabin is empty, the presence is unmistakable, a lingering reminder of the miners whose lives ended too soon and whose spirits remain tethered to the wilderness, replaying the moments of their demise for any who dare to watch. The forest, the cabin, and the spirits combine to create an atmosphere where ordinary perception falters. Whispers, shadows, cold drafts, and sudden noises serve as a constant reminder that the wilderness holds more than natural beauty. Within Blackwater Cabin, the echoes of the past endure, a chilling testament to lives lost and the thin line between the living and the dead. Visitors leave with stories, shivers, and a lingering sense that the miners who died here are still very much present, watching, guiding, and replaying their final moments in a cycle that never ends. Silver Pine Cabin sits tucked within the dense forest of the Snoqualmie area, its weathered timber walls blending seamlessly with the surrounding evergreens. The cabin, isolated from the nearest road by winding trails and thick underbrush, is shrouded in a constant hush, broken only by the whisper of wind to the pines or the distant call of a raven. Even on clear days, a low, lingering mist seems to cling to the area, giving the cabin an otherworldly appearance. Locals have long whispered about its haunted reputation, warning travelers that Silver Pine is not just a relic of pioneer Lithia. It is a place where the past refuses to remain buried. The interior is modest, with creaking floorboards, a stone hearth blackened with age, and simple furnishings that have stood for decades. Yet it is not the cabina-esque age that unnerves guests. It is a presence that lingers. Many report the faint sound of singing drifting from the corners of the rooms, soft and melodic, yet hollow in tone, as if sung by voices from another time. The melody often rises and falls without pattern, sometimes echoing across the cabin, other times fading suddenly, leaving only the sound of the wind. Doors and windows behave unpredictably. Visitors have described doors slamming shut when no breeze is present, or swinging open slowly as though inviting some near or something inside. Lights flicker inexplicably, lanterns dimming or flaring as if unseen fingers are manipulating them. Some guests have felt invisible hands brushing against their arms or shoulders, gentle nudges guiding them toward certain corners or away from areas they had intended to explore. The sensation is almost tactile, a reminder that the cabin is alive with unseen inhabitants, though their intentions are neither entirely malevolent nor wholly benevolent. Shadowy figures are occasionally glimpsed in peripheral vision, vanishing when observed directly. Some describe seeing silhouettes moving across the walls, appearing as if caught between the physical and spiritual world. Others have glimpsed figures near windows, staring silently at the forest beyond before fading into the mist. These apparitions seem to reenact fragments of life once lived within the cabin, echoes of the past intertwined with the present. Guests report feeling an oppressive stillness, a heavy weight pressing down, as though the cabin itself is aware of every movement and every step. The history of Silver Pine Cabin provides context to its haunting. Local legend tells of a family who perished in a sudden snowstorm decades ago. Cut off from the nearby town by deep drifts and relentless winds, they succumbed to the cold within the very walls of the cabin they had called home. Their struggle, fear, and despair are said to have left an indelible mark, binding their spirits to the structure. Those who stay overnight sometimes report seeing fleeting images of family members moving through the rooms or standing near the hearth, repeating gestures from their final hours. Others hear whispers that carry warnings, as if the spirits are trying to communicate something left unfinished. The surrounding forest adds to the sense of isolation and unease. Snow often lingers long after it has melted elsewhere, and the pines seem to close in around the cabin. Visitors report seeing figures walking between the trees, only to vanish when approached. Lights are said to dance across the snow at night, moving without source, sometimes leading explorers toward the cabin, other times into the deeper forest. Footsteps crunch in the snow, yet no one is there, and occasionally faint voices carry on the wind, echoing faintly with tones of warning or lamentation. Guests frequently describe an overwhelming mix of emotions while inside Silver Pine Cabin. There is a sense of sorrow and loss, as if the air itself remembers the tragedy that occurred. Fear and curiosity intermingle, drawing people deeper into the cabina-esque rooms while simultaneously urging caution. Many leave with a shiver. Stories of cold touches, mysterious lights, and fleeting shadows, and the unshakable feeling of having been watched by unseen eyes. Silver Pine Cabin is not simply haunted by echoes. It is a place where the past and present converge. The spirits of the family, caught in their final moments, are thought to replay fragments of their life over and over, manifesting as singing, moving shadows, and guiding or warning touches. The environment amplifies their presence, from flickering lanterns to slamming doors, creating an immersive experience that leaves visitors both awed and unnerved. Even during daylight, the cabin carries a weight of lingering tragedy. The air can feel thick and cold, carrying whispers that vanish when spoken to. Explorers report seeing objects shift ever so slightly, chairs move from their original positions, or the faint glint of metal from a lantern that no one touched. Every detail suggests an active presence, a spirit world that refuses to be ignored. In every corner of Silver Pine Cabin, the past feels present. The snowstorm that claimed the family left more than frost, and Silencia, it left imprints of fear, loss, and vigilance. Their spirits, tethered to cabin, continue to exist in a liminal space between worlds. Guests leave with stories of flickering lights, ghostly singing, invisible touches, and shadows that disappear too quickly to follow. Silver Pine Cabin remains a chilling reminder that some tragedies are never fully buried, and that the echoes of those lost linger, guiding, warning, or simply watching for all who dare to enter. Darkwood Cabin sits deep in the forest of Okanagan County, a small structure of weathered logs and moss-covered timbers that seems to disappear into surrounding woods. Its isolation is profound. The nearest road winds miles away through dense pines, making the cabin accessible only by narrow trails that twist among rocky outcrops and shadowed streams. Even in daylight, a sense of unease permeates the area, and by night, the darkness becomes almost tangible, pressing in from all sides. Locals speak of the cabin in hushed tones, warning travelers that Darkwood is not merely abandoned. It is alive with the memories and spirits of those who once called it home. Visitors to Darkwood often describe the first unsettling experiences long before they step inside. The path leading to the cabin seems to shift subtly. Familiar landmarks appear in unexpected places, and shadows among the trees appear to move independently of the wind. Those who walk the trail at dusk report hearing the faint crunch of footsteps behind them, only to turn and find no one there. The sounds grow louder as night falls, echoing unervingly through the still forest. Some have felt invisible presences brush past them, cold and weightless, as if guiding or warning them as they approach the cabin. Stepping inside, the atmosphere becomes heavier. The air is damp and cool, carrying a faint scent of pine, soot, and something indefinably metallic. The cabina's interior is simple, with a central hearth, a few rough-hewn chairs, and a small table scarred by years of use. Yet despite the simplicity, visitors often sense that the space is inhabited. Furniture shifts subtly, chairs are found out of place, and sometimes doors open or close without human intervention. Flickering lights, whether from lanterns left behind or unseen, Circesa cast eerie shadows that seem to move with life of their own, crawling along the walls and across the floorboards. The most unsettling experiences, however, come from whispers. Visitors report hearing soft voices call their names, drifting through the cabin like a chill wind. At times, the whispers form full sentences, warnings, or urgent instructions, though they vanish as soon as attention is focused on them. Some explorers have felt invisible hands press lightly against their shoulders or back, guiding them toward certain areas or pushing them away from others. The sensation is never threatening, but the intent remains ambiguous, leaving a lingering tension that is hard to shake. Shadowy figures are occasionally glimpsed in the corners of the room or through frosted windows. They often appear as trappers in old clothing, moving with a slow, deliberate gait, carrying tools or supplies that belong to them in life. When observed directly, the figures vanish, but their presence is unmistakable, leaving a cold impression in the air, and a sense that they are continuing tasks they began decades ago. Some visitors have reported seeing these spirits climbing into the loft, tending to unseen fires, or simply standing vigil over the cabin, watching silently as if guarding their territory. Local lore explains these hauntings. Darkwood Cabin is said to belong to a small group of trappers who lived and worked in the forest many years ago. They were deeply connected to the land, relying on it for survival and sustenance. When they passed, some under mysterious circumstances, and others to the harsh conditions of the wilderness, it is believed their spirits could not leave the area they loved in life. Now, they are bound to the cabin and its immediate surroundings, reliving fragments of their existence for any living visitor to witness. Snow, rain, or fog sometimes descend suddenly, creating a natural barrier that isolates the cabin further and muffling any sound from the outside world. In these moments, The isolation feels total, and the whispers, footsteps, and flickering lights become more pronounced, as if the spirits are asserting their presence. Guests have reported an overwhelming mix of emotions inside Darkwood Cabin. A deep sadness accompanies the sightings and sounds, as if the forest and the cabin remember the hardships and solitude of the trappers' lives. At the same time, there is fascination and curiosity, a pull toward the unexplained that draws people deeper into the Cabina S rooms. The interplay of fear and wonder is constant, leaving visitors alert and cautious, but also strangely compelled to explore. Even when leaving, the effects linger. Travelers often describe feeling eyes watching them from the forest edge, hearing whispers fading with the wind, or glimpsing shadowy figures among the trees as they make their way back down the trail. The experience is both haunting and unforgettable, a reminder that some places carry the memories of those who love them too deeply to depart completely. Darkwood Cabin remains a sentinel of the past, where the spirits of former trappers continue their quiet existence. They move through the cabin, tend to invisible tasks, and roam the surrounding forest, neither fully here nor gone. Visitors come seeking solitude, adventure, or simply the thrill of the unknown. But all leave with the undeniable impression that Darkwood Cabin watches, listens, and endures, a place where the past refuses to let go, and the living are welcomed, guided, or warned by those who remain. Whispering Creek Cabin is tucked into the dense forest of Chelan County, its wooden exterior weathered and darkened by decades of rain and snow. The cabin sits quietly beside a rushing creek, whose waters tumble over rocks with a constant roar that seems to echo through the surrounding woods. During the day, the cabin appears peaceful, almost idyllic, framed by moss-covered trees and the glinting surface of the water. But at night, a different presence emerges, one that many visitors have described as unsettling, if not outright terrifying. From the moment travelers approach the cabin, there is a sense that they are not alone. The creek's rushing water seems to carry more than the sound of moving water. Faint voices have been heard echoing through the forest, whispers that rise and fall with the current. Some say they call the Visitora's name softly, almost pleadingly, as if trying to draw attention. Footsteps are often reported along the deck or within the surrounding trees, but when guests look, the area is empty and no animal tracks can be found in the muddy soil. The natural isolation of the cabin amplifies these sounds, making them impossible to ignore. Inside, the cabin itself seems alive. Doors swing open or close without anyone touching them, and chairs or small pieces of furniture are found in places they were never left. Visitors often hear the soft creak of floorboards, footsteps pacing from room to room, or the distant sound of someone climbing the stairs to the loft. Sometimes, shadows appear along the walls or just outside the windows, taking shapes that are vaguely human. When observed directly, these shadows vanish, leaving only the flickering reflection of the creek's water on the cabin walls. The source of the hauntings is said to be tragic. Local legend speaks of a child who drowned in the creek many decades ago. The details are sparse, but the story suggests that the child may have wandered too close to the water's edge one summer evening, falling into the fast-moving current. Despite frantic searches, the child was never recovered, and grief settled over the small family that once lived here. It is believed that the child's spirit remained tethered to the waters where life ended and, over time, extended its presence to the cabin and surrounding woods. Visitors often describe a mixture of fear and sorrow when encountering Cabina's supernatural phenomena. The voices are rarely aggressive. Instead, they carry a sense of longing, almost as if the child is searching for company or attention. Some explorers report feeling a cold hand brush their shoulder or a sudden pressure in a room, as if the spirit is trying to guide them toward the creek or warn them away. Others hear soft, mournful laughter or the sound of a small footstep running across the floor, though no child is ever seen. The creek itself plays a crucial role in the haunting. At night, mist rises from the water, curling among the trees and creating fleeting shapes that vanish as quickly as they appear. Visitors have reported seeing shadowy figures along the water at its edge, sometimes crouching as if observing, sometimes standing and staring silently before dissolving into the fog. The sound of the creek seems to carry these apparitions, the water acting as both a conduit and a boundary between the spirit world and the living. Even when the cabin is empty, travelers often hear faint splashes. In the creek, that cannot be explained. Many who stay in the cabin overnight report that the activity intensifies after dark. Shadows become more pronounced, whispers clearer, and the cold spots deeper. Lights from lanterns or flashlights sometimes bend unnaturally, casting eerie reflections on the walls. Some guests describe feeling drawn toward the creek, as if an unseen hand is pulling them. Others feel a sudden compulsion to leave, feeling a warning that the spirit does not want them near the water. The experiences vary, but almost all share the same underlying sense that the child's presence is real, persistent, and ever watchful. Despite the unsettling events, there is a strange allure to Whispering Creek Cabin. Visitors return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity, the challenge of encountering the unexplained, or the haunting beauty of the setting. The combination of dense forest, rushing water, and the lingering presence of the past create an atmosphere unlike any other. It is a place where nature and the supernatural converge, and where the line between reality and the unseen feels impossibly thin. Those who leave the cabin often carry the experience with them. Some report hearing whispers or feeling touches long after they return home. Others claim to see fleeting images of the child's shadow near streams or in mirrors, reminders that the spirit continues to linger. The creek flows on, constant and unchanging, but the presence tied to it remains an eternal echo of tragedy and longing. Whispering Creek Cabin endures as a place of mystery and sorrow. Its walls, floors, and surrounding woods are alive with the memories of the past, tethered to the life that ended too soon. Guests are drawn into the story each time they visit, encountering echoes of the child who remains beside the rushing creek, watching, whispering, and reminding all who enter that some spirits never leave, and that the forest and water hold more than meets the eye. Bloodroot Cabin sits deep in the dense wilderness of the Mount Baker region, hidden among towering evergreens and tangled underbrush. Its weathered wooden walls are streaked with decades of rain and snow, giving the structure a somber, almost mournful appearance. During daylight, the cabin appears quiet and unassuming, a relic of early settlement. But after dark, Bloodroot Cabin takes on a far more ominous character, a place where the line between the living and the dead feels impossibly thin. Visitors often notice a sudden drop in temperature as they approach, a chill that seems to seep through clothing and skin. The forest surrounding the cabin is unusually silent, the normal sounds of birds or rustling leaves replaced by a heavy, expectant stillness. Many guests have reported hearing footsteps that crunch across the forest floor, though when they peer into the shadows, there is no one to be seen. Some swear they have felt cold. Invisible hands brush their shoulders or tug at their jackets, as though the spirits themselves are guiding or warning them. Inside, the atmosphere is even more unsettling. Doors move on their own, swinging open or slamming shut with no discernible cause. Furniture shifts slightly, sometimes in the middle of the night, leaving guests questioning whether they moved it and simply forgot. Shadows flicker across the walls, independent of any candlelight or lantern, and faint whispers echo through the rooms, a mix of hushed voices and mournful sighs that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The cabin's haunting is tied to its violent past. Bloodroot Cabin was once home to early settlers who struggled to survive in the harsh wilderness. Historical accounts suggest that several of them met tragic ends, succumbing to accidents, illness, or violence in disputes over land and resources. It is said that the spirits of these settlers never left the land, bound by their untimely deaths and the hardship that defined their lives. Visitors often describe a sense of being watched, a constant awareness that unseen eyes follow their movements, particularly in corners and shadowed doorways. Many who spend the night in the cabin report that the activity intensifies after sunset. Cold spots become more pronounced, moving unpredictably through rooms and hallways. Some guests have felt invisible hands press against them, gentle at first but increasingly insistent, as if trying to force movement or attention. Lights from lanterns or flashlights sometimes flicker or bend in strange ways, casting distorted reflections across the walls. Shadowy figures appear at the edges of vision, lingering for a moment before vanishing into darkness, leaving only a sense of presence behind. Whispers and voices are a constant feature of the haunting. Guests often hear murmurs that sound like conversations, though when they listen closely, the words are impossible to understand. Some claim to hear their name spoken softly, or phrases that feel like warnings. Occasionally, a low, guttural growl or groan resonates through the cabin, echoing from the floors or walls, sending shivers down the spine of anyone present. Even those who visit during daylight hours report an uneasy feeling, a sense that the cabin is alive with memories of pain and suffering. The surrounding wilderness seems to amplify the cabina's eerie qualities. Fog often settles over the forest in the evening, curling between trees and around the cabin, creating shifting shapes that vanish as quickly as they appear. The rustling of branches or the distant cry of wildlife can take on unnatural qualities, blending with the whispers from within the cabin. Travelers sometimes catch glimpses of figures standing at the tree lean, still and silent, watching. When approached, these figures dissolve into the mist, leaving behind only the sensation that something is observing their every move. Despite the unnerving experiences, Bloodroot Cabin attracts visitors drawn by curiosity and the thrill of encountering the supernatural. The combination of isolation, dark history, and persistent paranormal activity makes a location unlike any other. Those who stay often speak of a strange fascination, an inability to look away from the shadows or ignore the whispers, as though the spirits are compelling attention and acknowledgement. Even after leaving, guests sometimes carry a lingering sense of the cabin with them. Some report feeling sudden chills or catching glimpses of figures in reflective surfaces, while others hear soft murmurs when alone. The presence of the settlers is described as constant and unyielding, a reminder that the cabin is more than a structure of wood, and Nailsa is a vessel of memory, pain, and unresolved lives. Bloodroot Cabin remains a site where the past and present collide. The spirits of those early settlers, bound by the violent circumstances of their deaths, continue to inhabit the cabin and its surrounding forest. For those who dare to enter, it is a place of both fascination and fear. Where whispers follow the living, shadows linger longer than they should, and unseen hands remind visitors that some spirits never leave and some histories cannot rest. Moss Hollow Cabin sits deep in the Olympic Mountains, tucked away in a dense forest where thick moss hangs from towering evergreens and perpetual fog blankets the ground. Even during daylight, the cabin seems to exude an otherworldly presence, its weatherwood darkened by years of rain and shadowed by the encroaching forest. As evening falls, the mist thickens, curling around the cabin like a living shroud, and those who venture near often feel a sudden stillness, as if surrounding woods themselves are holding their breath. Visitors to Moss Hollow Cabin frequently report an unsettling atmosphere. Doors creak and open on their own, swinging slowly as though pushed by invisible hands. Windows rattle despite the absence of wind, and faint, shadowy figures are sometimes glimpsed moving just beyond the corners of vision. These figures vanish the moment anyone attempts to focus on them, leaving only a lingering sense of presence, a feeling that unseen eyes are tracking every movement. Guests often describe a sudden dizziness or disorientation upon entering the cabin, as though the air itself carries a subtle, disorienting weight. Whispers are a constant companion at Moss Hollow. Visitors hear faint murmurs drifting through the fog, voices speaking in low tones in the surrounding woods. Sometimes the words are intelligible, often they are not, but there is always an unmistakable feeling that the whispers are directed at those who approach the cabin, warning, guiding, or perhaps mocking them. Some have reported hearing their own names called softly from the shadows, a sound that sends chills down the spine and makes even the bravest hesitate. The cabina's haunting is deeply tied to the tragedies that occurred in the mountains. Moss Hollow was once a shelter for loggers working in the dense, treacherous forests of the Olympic Mountains. Storms in the region could arrive without warning, bringing torrential rain, snow, and powerful winds. Several loggers lost their lives in these sudden tempests, caught in falling trees, flash floods, or buried in snow. Local legend claims that their spirits never left the forest, tethered by the violent and untimely nature of their deaths. These spirits are said to linger around the cabin, continuing their watch over the land where they perished. Inside the cabin, the paranormal activity intensifies after dark. Shadows stretch across walls, moving independently of any light source. Candles or lanterns flicker erratically, and furniture seems to shift slightly overnight, as though nudged by unseen hands. Guests have described the sensation of being closely watched, a pressure at the back of the neck or along the shoulders. Even when they are alone, it is as if the logger's spirits are scrutinizing each movement, silently judging intruders while remaining just beyond reach. Moss Hollow's exterior is equally unsettling. The surrounding forest is thick with moss and undergrowth, making it difficult to approach the cabin without careful steps. Fog frequently settles into the hollows and valleys, creating shifting shapes that vanish when approached. Shadows at the edge of the tree-line often appear humanoid, still and silent, watching travelers as they pass. Occasionally, faint lights are seen moving among the trees, like lanterns carried by figures long gone. When approached, these lights disappear, leaving only the oppressive quiet of the mountains. Many visitors who brave a night at Moss Hollow Cabin report dreams or visions that feel impossibly real. Some recount seeing loggers at work in the forest, unaware of death approaching, only to vanish suddenly. Others describe hearing storms raging outside, though no storm is present, accompanied by urgent whispers warning them to leave. These experiences suggest that the spirits are not merely lingering, they are reenacting the moments leading up to their deaths, replaying their final experiences for anyone sensitive enough to perceive them. Despite the fear, the cabin draws those intrigued by the supernatural. The combination of isolation, natural beauty, and lingering tragedy creates a powerful atmosphere that is impossible to ignore. Guests often describe a strange mixture of fear and fascination, compelled to observe the shadows, listen to the whispers, and feel the presence that saturates every corner of Moss Hollow. The cabin and the surrounding forest become almost alive, a place where the past refuses to remain buried, and the line between the living and the dead grows thin. Even after leaving Moss Hollow, many feel the cabina's presence lingering. Sudden chills, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, or soft whispers can follow travelers for days, reminding them that the spirits of the loggers are never far. The haunting is not limited to those who step inside. The forest surrounding the cabin is a corridor for these restless souls, and anyone who ventures into the mist may encounter their watchful eyes. Moss Hollow Cabin endures as a site of spectral activity and legend. The loggers who died in the unforgiving mountains continue to haunt the cabin and its surrounding woods, bound by the suddenness of their deaths and the wilderness they loved. For those who visit, it is a place of awe and terror, a haunting reminder that some spirits remain tied to places they once walked, echoing the tragedies of the past, forever vigilant and eternally present. Ravenna SN Cabin sits isolated in the forest of Snoqualmie Pass, surrounded by towering evergreens and the constant whisper of wind through the mountains. The cabin is small and weathered, its timbers darkened by decades of rain and snow. Even on clear days, a sense of unease seems to cling to the building, an invisible weight that settles on anyone who approaches. The road leading to the cabin winds through dense forest, often shrouded in mist, and travelers report that once you enter the area, it feels as though the outside world falls away, leaving only the cabin and the shadows that surround it. Visitors to Ravenna SN quickly notice the atmosphere inside. Cold gusts of wind sweep through the cabin, even when the doors and windows are securely shut, carrying with them an unsettling chill. Footsteps echo across the wooden floors, though no one else is present. Doors creak and swing slowly as if moved by invisible hands, and shadows flicker unnaturally along walls, sometimes forming shapes that resemble human figures. Those brave enough to spend the night often report the feeling of being watched, a constant pressure in the back of the neck, or the sensation of unseen eyes tracking their every move. Whispers are a common occurrence in the cabin, low and almost imperceptible at first. Some guests claim they are hearing voices speaking in languages they cannot understand, uttering chants or incantations that seem to reverberate in the bones. The whispers sometimes swell into what sounds like a murmured conversation, only to vanish when anyone attempts to follow the sound. Others have reported hearing their name spoken softly from the corners of the room, a voice that seems both intimate and threatening, pulling them toward unseen corners of the cabin. The Cabina's dark reputation is rooted in local legend. Ravina SN was once inhabited by a prospector who vanished mysteriously decades ago. Stories tell a man who dabbled in forbidden rituals, attempting to harness powers beyond the mortal realm. Locals say he bound spirits to the cabin, creating an enduring presence that refused to leave even after his disappearance. Those who enter Ravina's End are said to encounter the restless spirits, trapped and tethered to the cabin by the rituals performed long ago. The forest and the cabin itself act as a kind of supernatural cage, where the boundary between the living and the dead is perilously thin. Inside the cabin, the paranormal activity intensifies after nightfall. Shadows move independently of any light source, stretching across the walls and ceilings in impossible ways. Furniture occasionally shifts as if nudged by invisible hands, and candles or lanterns flicker even in the absence of wind. Guests have described seeing forms standing silently in corners, watching them with unseen intent before dissolving into the darkness. Sometimes the air thickens inexplicably, heavy with the sensation of a presence pressing in from all sides, leaving visitors gasping for breath or shivering uncontrollably. The forest surrounding Ravina SN cabin is equally unsettling. Mist often rolls through the trees, hiding shapes that vanish the moment anyone focuses on them. Shadowy figures are sometimes glimpsed among the pines, still and silent, watching travelers from a distance. Strange lights occasionally flicker between the trees, like lanterns held by figures long gone, illuminating paths that seem to lead nowhere. Some who have ventured too far from the cabin report disorientation, finding themselves inexplicably back at the Cabina's threshold despite hours of walking. Many visitors recount dreams or visions while staying at Ravina's End. Some have seen the prospector at work, performing rituals that summon indistinct forms from the shadows. Others describe being Gadita or Chasita to the forest by unseen hands, experiencing moments of terror and confusion that feel more real than waking life. These visions suggest that the spirits are not merely lingering. They are active, replaying fragments of prospector's work and their own unfinished business, drawing the living into their spectral world. Despite the fear that permeates Ravina's End, the cabin attracts those drawn to the supernatural. Its combination of isolation, natural beauty, and lingering tragedy creates a compelling, almost magnetic atmosphere. Guests often speak of a mixture of fear and fascination, unable to resist observing the shadows, listening to the whispers, and feeling the presence that saturates the cabin and surrounding forest. Every step taken inside and outside the cabin reinforces a sensation that the past is very much alive, replaying itself for anyone willing to witness it. Many report lingering effects, cold chills, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, or soft whispers can follow travelers long after they have departed. A haunting reminder that the spirits tethered to the cabin are never truly gone. Those who encounter them carry a sense of unease, a feeling that the forest and the cabin remain alive with unseen watchers, forever bound by dark rituals performed decades ago. Ravina's End cabin endures as a place of spectral activity and legend. The spirits bound by the prospector's rituals continue to haunt its walls and the surrounding forest, replaying fragments of their existence for anyone who dares to enter. For visitors, it is a place of fear, fascination, and unshakable uneasia, a haunting reminder that some presences, once summoned, refuse to leave, and that the boundary between the living and the dead can be thinner than a whisper in the night. Timberline cabin rests atop a ridge in the dense foothills of Mount Rainier, shrouded by evergreens and the constant whisper of the wind through the trees. From a distance, it appears as a quiet retreat, a simple wooden structure blending into the forest. Yet those who approach the cabin often speak of an immediate sense of unease, a heaviness that settles over the ridge as if the air itself remembers past tragedies. Even during daylight, shadows seem longer than they should be, and the surrounding forest hums with an almost imperceptible presence. Visitors frequently report strange occurrences from the moment they reach Timberline Cabin. Lanterns flicker without cause, casting brief, shifting glows across the timbers. Shadows move independently of any light source, stretching along walls, floors, and the forest outside in ways that defy explanation. The wind sometimes carries faint, disembodied whispers that seem to speak in words just beyond comprehension, calling out names or issuing low warnings that send chills down the spine. Guests have described the feeling of being watched, a subtle pressure on their backs or shoulders, as if unseen hands are present, guiding or restraining them in ways that cannot be seen. The cabin's history adds to its dark reputation. Timberline was once occupied by a trapper known for his solitary expeditions into surrounding woods. One winter, he disappeared without a trace, leaving only the cabin and his belongings behind. Local legend claims that he never truly left, that his spirit remained tethered to the forest and cabin, roaming the trees and ridge where he once hunted and trapped. Those who have encountered him describe a figure glimpsed between the pines, wearing worn furs, moving silently, watching travelers on the edge of the woods before vanishing without a sound. Inside the cabin, the paranormal activity intensifies, particularly after nightfall. Floors creak under invisible weight. Doors open or close on their own, and lanterns sway as if caught in a sudden breeze that no window or chimney could create. Guests often hear the sound of footsteps pacing in the adjoining rooms, slow and deliberate, stopping abruptly when anyone investigates. Occasionally, a faint scent of smoke or pine fills the cabin, though no fire burns. Some visitors report seeing fleeting glimpses of the trapper-esque figure reflected in windows or shadows along the walls, always watching, always present. Whispers are a recurring phenomenon at Timberline Cabin. They seem to drift through the rooms, carried on the wind or emanating from corners where sound should not reach. Some visitors claim the whispers are warnings, urging them to leave before darkness falls, while others say they are gentle guides, coaxing explorers safely back to the ridge trail. The messages are never clear, but their effect is undeniable, leaving guests tense, alert, and aware of forces beyond their understanding. The forest surrounding Timberline Cabin is as active as the cabin itself. Mist often curls around the trees, creating a veil that hides movement and amplifies the eerie sense of isolation. Shadowy figures are sometimes seen flitting between the trunks, disappearing the moment anyone focuses on them. Lantern-like lights occasionally float among the trees, drifting along paths that lead nowhere, giving the impression of summonia or something to patrol in the woods. Travelers are described being drawn off the path by sudden gusts or whispered instructions, only to find themselves inexplicably back at the cabin, as if the forest itself were guiding them. Many guests recount vivid dreams or visions while staying at Timberline Cabin. Some see the trapper at work, laying traps or moving silently through the snow, while others experience the forest alive with unseen presences. In these dreams, the line between reality and the spirit world blurs, leaving visitors questioning what is waking and what is imagined. The cabin and its surroundings seem to replay fragments of the trapper-esque life, allowing the living a glimpse into the restless existence of the deceased. Even after leaving Timberline Cabin, many report lingering effects. Cold gusts, fleeting shadows, and the faint sensation of unseen hands following them can persist for days. Some claim to hear whispers in the wind during hikes, or see fleeting forms between trees in familiar forests, as though the trapper-esque presence has extended beyond the ridge. Those who experience the cabin often speak of a mix of fear and fascination, compelled by the thought of returning to witness the spirits once more. Timberline Cabin endures as a place of mystery and supernatural activity. Its isolated location, combined with the legend of the missing trapper, and the constant disturbances reported by visitors, has created a site where the living and the dead coexist in uneasy proximity. Shadows move independently, whispers drift through the night, and the forest itself seems alive with the watchful eyes of a spirit tethered to its old home. For those who enter, Timberline Cabin is a haunting reminder that some presences never leave, and that the forest and ridge hold secrets that the living are rarely meant to understand. Shadow Pine Cabin sits deep within the dense forest of the Olympic Peninsula, surrounded by towering pines and thick underbrush. A chill seems to hang in the air, even in the warmth of summer, and the quiet of the forest is almost oppressive, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath. Visitors often feel a sudden drop in temperature upon stepping onto the porch, a cold that seeps into bones and lingers. Inside, the cabin is equally unsettling. Doors that have been secured swing open of their own accord, sometimes with a soft creak, other times slamming shut with startling force. Chairs rock slightly even when no one sits in them, and shadows dance along the walls as if moved by invisible hands. Guests have reported hearing whispers, soft and indistinct at first, growing louder when they try to listen closely. The voices seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, echoing through the empty rooms and hallways. One of the most frequently reported phenomena at Shadow Pine Cabin is the appearance of children. Apparitions of young boys and girls are seen playing, running from one corner of the cabin to another, laughing faintly and disappearing when approached. Some visitors claim to feel a small hand brush against theirs or hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet on the wooden floor, yet when they turn, the cabin is empty. The presence of these children, playful yet sorrowful, creates a strange mix of fear and sympathy in those who encounter them. The legend surrounding Shadow Pine Cabin tells of a family who once lived there, cut off from the outside world by the thick forest and rugged terrain. One night, decades ago, a fire consumed the cabin. It is said that no one survived, the flames swallowing the family before neighbors could arrive. Since that time, the cabin has been a hot spot for paranormal activity, the spirits of the family remaining behind, bound to the place where they met their tragic end. Locals warn that the cabin seems to replay fragments of that night, the cold drafts and flickering lights echoing the chaos of fire. Visitors describe the cabin as being most active in the late evening and during storms, when wind rattles the trees and rain taps insistently against the roof. The sounds of the forest blend with the ghostly whispers, creating an unsettling symphony of noise that can unnerve even the most seasoned hikers. Doors creak open and shut, chairs rock violently, and the faint sound of children's laughter can be heard through the storm, rising and falling with the wind. Some explorers have reported being suddenly overcome by a feeling of dread, as if an unseen presence is watching, waiting to see what they will do next. The cabin is not only haunted by apparitions, but by subtle, intangible presences as well. Guests often speak of feeling unseen hands brushing past them, or an invisible weight pressing down on their shoulders. Some report objects moving slightly, cups tipping over, or pictures shifting on the walls. These disturbances are fleeting and inconsistent, adding to the sense that the cabin itself is alive, responding to the presence of visitors. The spirits seem to interact selectively, playful or threatening depending on their mood, offering fleeting glimpses of their existence, but never fully revealing themselves. Many who have stayed at Shadow Pine Cabin describe vivid dreams or sensations while inside. Some claim to see flames flickering in empty rooms, or the spectral outline of family gathered around the fire before it consumed them. Others awaken in the night to the sensation of being observed, hearing whispered warnings or the soft footsteps of children pacing the cabin. These experiences leave visitors with a profound sense of unease, a lingering awareness that the cabin is a place where the veil between the living and the dead is remarkably thin. Even after leaving Shadow Pine Cabin, the effects persist. Cold drafts, fleeting shadows, and the faint echoes of childrina as laughter follows some visitors long after they have returned to town. Some hikers report feeling an inexplicable tug toward the cabin when passing through the surrounding woods, as if the spirits are still drawing attention to the place where they remain tethered. Those who are drawn to explore the cabin often describe a mixture of fear and fascination, compelled to witness the lingering presence of the family and the mysteries that surround their tragic end. Shadow Pine Cabin endures as one of the Olympic Peninsula's most haunted locations. Its isolation, combined with the tragic history of the family who perished in the fire, has created a space where the living and the dead coexist in uneasy proximity. Doors slam, chairs rock, cold drafts sweep through rooms, and whispers echo in the night. Children's apparitions play and vanish. Spectral figures linger in the shadows, and unseen hands interact with visitors. For those who enter, Shadow Pine Cabin is a chilling reminder that some tragedies leave more than memories behind, and they leave spirits bound forever to the place where their lives ended, watching, waiting, and occasionally playing. Frostfall Cabin is tucked deep in the North Cascades wilderness, surrounded by towering evergreens and rugged, snow-dusted peaks. From the moment visitors approach, an unsettling stillness seems to hang over the area, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. The air is often colder than the surrounding woods, and travelers report a sudden chill that seeps into their bones, a forewarning of the experiences that await inside the cabin. Even in the warmth of summer, Frostfall exudes a frost-laden aura, making it clear that this is a place where the living and the dead brush close together. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is equally unnerving. Doors swing open by themselves, sometimes slowly, sometimes with a loud bang that echoes through the empty rooms. Footsteps can be heard pacing along the wooden floors, though no one is visible. Visitors are described a faint murmur of voices, whispering words that cannot be understood, but carry a tone of warning or despair. Shadows flit along the walls and ceilings, moving independently of the flickering lantern light, giving the impression of figures watching from the corners of the room. The windows of Frostfall Cabin seem to act as portals to the past. Figures are sometimes glimpsed staring out at the surrounding forest, only to vanish when approached. Some visitors have reported seeing a man in hunting attire scanning the tree-line, a woman clutching a basket as if collecting supplies, or children peering out curiously before disappearing into the shadows. These apparitions are fleeting but leave a lasting impression, their presence accompanied by a sense of sorrow and isolation that mirrors the Cabina's history. Local legend holds that the cabin was once home to hunters and settlers who became lost in the harsh North Cascades. Many perished in the forest surrounding Frostfall Cabin, their bodies claimed by snowstorms, hidden ravines, or dense undergrowth. Over time, it is said, their spirits became bound to the cabin, returning to the place they once called home. Visitors report that these spirits are not always malevolent, but their presence is inescapable, a reminder of the harsh wilderness and the dangers it conceals. The cabin is most active during winter months, when snow blankets the mountains and wind howls through the trees. During these times, ghostly footsteps are more frequent, doors slam with greater force, and the whispering voices seem to grow louder, almost urgent. Doors slam with greater force, and the whispering voices seem to grow louder, almost urgent. And the whispering voices seem to grow louder, almost urgent. Travelers have recounted hearing spectral voices calling warnings to stay away from certain trails, or the faint sound of chainsaws and axes, echoing the labor of settlers long gone. Lights flicker in the windows, as if lanterns are being lit by unseen hands. And sudden cold gusts move through the cabin, leaving a chill that cannot be explained. Visitors have also reported physical sensations that defy explanation. Some feel invisible hands brushing past their shoulders or tugging lightly at their clothing, as if guiding them away from danger or inviting them to explore further. Others experience sudden dizziness, a pressure in the chest, or an overwhelming sense of being watched. These manifestations are subtle yet persistent, reinforcing the idea that Frostfall Cabin is a threshold between the living world and the spirit realm. The spirits of the North Cascades seem to interact selectively, sometimes playful, sometimes foreboding. Guests have seen chairs rock gently as if someone unseen has just risen, or doors creak in the middle of the night, suggesting movement in other rooms. Some have felt an invisible presence following them up the stairs, or moving behind them as they explore, only to turn and find the space empty. These interactions, though often brief, leave visitors with a heightened awareness of Cabina's haunted nature and a lingering sense of unease. Even after leaving Frostfall Cabin, the effects remain. Travelers often report strange dreams, sudden chills, or the feeling of unseen eyes upon them long after they have returned home. The forest surrounding the cabin seems to echo the events inside, with the faint sound of footsteps or whispers carried by the wind. Some hikers claim they're drawn back to the area, unable to resist the pull of the spirits who remain, tied eternally to the cabin and its history. A place where isolation, tragedy, and the raw wilderness combine to create a realm where the dead are never truly gone. The ghostly hunters, settlers, and lost travelers remain tethered to the cabin, pacing the floors, peering through windows, and whispering warnings to those who dare enter. The doors slam, shadows move, and cold drafts sweep through the rooms, yet the spirits are neither wholly malevolent nor benign. They exist in a liminal space, a reminder of lives cut short in the enduring power of the wilderness. For anyone who steps across its threshold, Frostfall Cabin offers an experience both chilling and unforgettable, a place where the echoes of the past continue to roam, watching, warning, and waiting. And so, brave wanderers, we leave Washingtona as haunted cabins, isolated sanctuaries echoing with footsteps, whispers, and restless spirits. Next time you venture deep into the woods, listen carefully. The faint creak of a floorboard, the flicker of candlelight, or a shadow in a corner may not be the window. It may be a spirit who never left, watching, waiting, and perhaps inviting you to stay. Thank you for exploring these haunted forests and cabins with me. If you felt the chill, if you sense the unseen,